Thank you for patiently waiting for us to clean up and finish up with some closed session. Welcome. I'm happy to see so many people here in attendance. I have a few people who will want to speak in a few minutes. Before that, though, we will need approval of the minutes from our September meeting.
So approved.
I second.
Okay, all in favor of approving those minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And then we have our student reports. Oh, I'm sorry, we need to approve the agenda, and we have a slight change in the agenda. We're going to take the budget committee and move it after our,
Into administrative reports after facility and referendum planning. Does that work for you, Jack?
okay, so we're just gonna move that one committee to after. And other than that, everything is good with you?
Yep.
So I do need a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda with the changes.
Thank you, Mark.
Second.
By Jack. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
And now I think we're up to the student report. Thank you, ladies. We have Marissa and Isabel tonight. Welcome. Thank you.
So she said, I'm Marissa, and this is Izzy. So homecoming was last weekend, and last week we had lots of dress-up days, and a lot of people dressed up, which was good to see after not being able to for a year. We also had a successful pep rally. It was a blast. Sadly, seniors won though. And we also had Powder Puff dodgeball game the Sunday prior to homecoming. Juniors won that, so it's okay. And then we also had a Miracle Minute during the pep rally, which DECA raised a lot of money during that Miracle Minute. The football stands for homecoming were packed. We had to extend the stands a bit. It was against Watertown. We won 52-7. Also, the week prior, we had a big rival game against DeForest, and we won that game 23-20, which was good to see. Homecoming week, we also collected coats for kids, and during a normal year, barely any coats were collected, but this year the student body blew us away with a total of 350 coats and over 100 hats and many pairs of mittens.
Yeah. And then our girls golf team placed second at the WIA sectional meet, and this morning they went to state, which is very cool. And recently, last Friday, the student body participated in a blackout where we all wore black to honor the local high school kids that recently passed away. There's been a little problem with vandalism in the school's bathrooms lately with a social media trend where people will steal random things from school bathroom like soap dispensers, and the principal started talking about that. And then another thing was there was fake social media handles made for the principal, so that's trying to get taken down again. There's no school this Friday, which everybody's very excited about. Thought we should bring that up. And then we also have fall break coming up pretty soon. The PSAT is happening this Wednesday, and lots of sophomores and juniors are preparing to take it. And there was a walk that recently took place this past Saturday called Operation Rec 22, and it was to honor veterans and raise awareness about veteran suicide. And it's like there would be 13 miles, and then you'd split them up, and like one person would walk 1 mile, then another, and that pretty much went on like that. And yeah, and then Marissa has personal experience to share she want to talk about.
Yes, personal experience from quarantine that I was last week. This past week, I experienced what it was like to be home due to close contact. I received my call from Nola, the health assistant. She did great with a follow-up email letter with instructions for my testing date and date that I could return to school if all stayed negative. So sorry. She did clarify that attendance would be notified, but did not clarify what to do with communication with teachers. I had no instructions or calls from anyone at the high school. After a phone call back to the school, I learned I was on my own. I had to navigate an email to teachers to explain why I was out for a week. Some teachers were understanding, others not so much. I found there is no way to be a part of classroom via Zoom, a fellow student's phone, such as FaceTime, allowing me to listen in. or a recording on Schoology. All this technology is in place from last year, yet we can't get a Zoom call into the classroom or with the classroom on a recording. I have heard from other students and parents as well the frustration with having to stay at home as a high school student and not having the tools to be successful and getting behind. Ask anyone, the last place a high school student wants to be is home for a week, healthy and getting behind. My first day back to school was today, and I'm feeling overwhelmed with work and exams that I missed. I was out a week and my test ended up negative. I ask that you take a look at what is in place, as the year will probably look much the same with students in and out for extended periods of time. Thank you for your time and consideration regarding this issue. That is our monthly update. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for sharing that. That's
Yeah.
important for us to hear.
Yeah.
Very important. Any questions for our ladies this evening?
Is there, on the contact you got from the school about the close contact, is there anything you would suggest would help when you're getting that call and then having to transition back and forth?
I would say having more communication with the teachers and having materials available, because the only difference between this year and last year is that last year they had everything up for the whole year, and this year they're posting as they get assignments, so it's like daily of like you come into class, it's already posted for what that day is, but it's not that entire week. And so I didn't get that material and also wasn't aware of the material that was getting posted, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yeah, see you next month.
Yes.
All right, next are public comments, and I have probably 10, 12, so I think we'll get through these this evening. We are going to adhere to the 1 hour that is listed as allowable for this item, with each speaker getting up to 3 minutes. Ted is going to help me with timing tonight. Before we begin, I just would like to remind everybody to please respect each speaker, quietly allow them to have say their 3 minutes, and they will do that for you. So let's just have a nice, respectful public comment session. And the first person up is Bethany Pottinger.
Hi, my name is Bethany Pottinger. I teach first grade at Arboretum Elementary. First, I want to thank you guys for giving the community an opportunity to communicate with you through the community engagement meeting we had a couple of weeks ago. I was especially impressed with the high school students and recent alumni who stood up to speak about their own experiences. I still find it difficult to speak in front of people like this at 42, so I know at that young age I would not have had that courage. So I'm really impressed with our young people in our community. I also want to speak about the idea of being kind. I've heard some people say that we just need to teach our students to be kind to each other. This has been used at times to negate the idea that we need to explore and encourage the idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've heard people use this argument while saying that white students have been bullied in the district too, so we should just teach our kids to be kind, like Mr. Rogers says, and then we wouldn't have these problems. I think all of us can agree that we want our children to be kind, and we don't want any children to be bullied or to be bullies. However, I think there's more depth to being kind than just using good manners and not saying mean things to each other. To quote Mr. Rogers, we want to raise our children so that they can take a sense of pleasure in both their own heritage and the diversity of others. Understanding the different experiences of the people who surround us causes us to have more empathy toward all people and doesn't detract from our own sense of self. This is exactly what the DEI committee is working to promote through recommendations like providing professional development for staff members. We want our students to have the ability to develop a deeper sense of self while also developing a deeper understanding of others. We want to give our students the schema and skills to have meaningful conversations with all sorts of people without having them devolve into bickering or polarization. My goal for my students is to be more than just kind. I want them to be empathetic, curious, and eager to learn about the people they encounter, so that no matter where life leads them, they are ready to build bridges and work collaboratively. I would like to advocate for the idea that the DEI committee continue its work because it will help the teachers in our school district accomplish this goal. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Zach Jensen?
I wanted to touch on the efficacy of masks and the negligible effect they have on the transmission of a virus. I'd appreciate the opportunity to explain why that is from a more technical perspective, but that would take a little bit longer than 3 minutes. So Joan, I'll send you an email about that, and maybe we can set something up for next month. In the meantime, here are a couple graphs. One for the state of Wisconsin and one for Dane County. And there's an arrow on there showing where Governor Evers issued the statewide mask mandate. And you'll see that there's no appreciable change to the trend of COVID cases after the implementation of the mask mitigation practice. So if masks had an effect, there would be a dip or a change of some kind in these graphs, and you'll see there's no change. The community is not asking you to be pro-mask or anti-mask. The community is asking you to be pro-parent and take the position that parents have the right to choose what's best for their kids. Thanks.
Thank you. Greg Gens?
My name is Greg Gens, and I have 2 kids at Waunakee. I spoke recently about the unequal representation of ideology that has been created on the DEI committee, which has led to mistrust. An ideology that seems only to view our school district through the lenses of race and identity, leading to a divisive atmosphere of separation and distrust between labeled groups, rather than using a singular, all-inclusive, diverse lens. That every person is an individual who holds intrinsic, equal human value, should be treated with depth of kindness, and be accepted in any way that a person represents themselves physically or through personality. Examples that have led to our distrust: September of 2020, a previous school board member stated about the creation of the DEI committee, quote, "I drafted this document in a way to ensure that we could get pointed in the right direction, but I also wanted to ensure that it passed, and the board authorized it. So I deliberately didn't put a mission statement in there," end quote. What hidden agenda was left out of the document mentioned that if included would have railroaded the creation of the DEI committee? Transparency is paramount. Another point of distrust: choice of partnerships, which reflect the values where our administration, staff, and students are being led. The DEI committee chose to use the National Education Association, the country's largest educational labor unions, equity audit to evaluate our school. At the 2021 NEA's annual meeting, they pledged in new business item number 39 to, quote, "share and publicize through existing channels information already available on critical race theory, what it is and what it is not, have a team of staffers for members who want to learn more and fight back against anti-CRT rhetoric," quote. The NEA also pledged to provide a study, quote, "that critiques empire, white supremacy, anti-blackness, patriarchy, cis-heteropatriarchy, capitalism, and other forms of power and oppression at the intersections of our society, and that we oppose attempts to ban critical race theory," quote. Other union business items adopted included researching the organizations who oppose critical race theory, which would include parent groups. The backlash was so severe, all references described above were scrubbed from the NEA's website within 3 days. On September 13th, the DEI Ad Hoc Committee chairperson exposed their desire to review and recommend changes to hiring practices, existing policy, new policy, and curriculum, which would constitute an enormous power grab from elected board members, and if granted, an unacceptable abdication of elected authority. On September 21st, DEI committee members labeled opposing viewpoints and ideologies as hate. Grant the DEI committee their desired powers to review and see what you will all be labeled with when you disagree with them. You are responsible for righting this ship. The solution is simple. Ensure the committee is representative of the community as you are by your election to your seat. How? Create new DEI membership rules instructing each board member to appoint 2 DEI committee members, being staff, community, students, what have you. Allow the superintendent to appoint 1 school member to achieve an odd number voting body. Give a new ad hoc time frame of 6 to 12 months to evaluate the committee's effectiveness on its newly established charge and whether it has been able to achieve diversity, inclusiveness, and equal representation of ideology, you have the power to right this inequality of representation. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Laura Hack?
I'm all done. I can wait.
It doesn't stop. All right, I think we're good.
First of all, thank you for your time. My name is Laura Hack. So while we as a community agree with the general concepts of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Ad Hoc Committee's suggestions to help our children feel safe, basically no child left behind, equality for all, equality, equity, I'm asking our Board of Education for a call to action. Thoroughly to review the recommendations and compare to existing policies that we currently have so that time isn't wasted reinventing the wheel. Thoroughly vet the partnerships being suggested prior to moving forward yes, that's what I said. Prior to moving forward, Wisconsin Public Education Network should not be given the $1,700 as they are not impartial and their websites prove this. Please look into that before making a decision. Thoroughly consider why we are only listing BIPOC folks in the recommendations versus all underserved. I believe we should be calling out all of the underserved. If DEI committee will be a standing committee, make sure it contains people with diverse ideologies and people from various areas, students, staff, community members, who apply and have a limit of 1-year term, and notify community members and parents of potential decisions prior to implementing. Regarding masks, I contacted Dane County Public Health Department and was told Dane County remains a high level of transmission in the community. Yet we have the highest vaccination rate in the state, and we are the only county in the state that have a mask mandate. Do the math. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. But guess what? We always are getting the same result. We're extending the mask mandate, and I said not we, but the Dane County public health officials are. Actually, Zach and I did not talk before this meeting, but that is proof, and it's on the Dane County Public Health website. Our schools were equipped with $800,000 of HVAC upgrades, which means we have a leg up on other communities for air quality in our schools, which is most likely the reason why we have a zero caseload or near a zero caseload in our school district. And I didn't look at this week's numbers, but that was basically, it has been trending in that. So I would like the Board of Education call to action to add the mask mandate to the November Board of Education agenda for November, because it's currently not on there. And November 2nd is when the Dane County mask mandate is supposed to end, and the Board of Education meetings after that. Again, parents have the right to choose what's best for our children. Other counties surrounding us, you should look at their stats. Basically, they're not doing that much better than we are. They do have more cases, but they might not have an $800,000 upgrade in HVAC throughout their school district either. So again, allow us parents to have that choice. Lastly, to go hand in hand with the above, I want to ask the board for a call to action to change their policies with regards to social media for elected officials. Our Board of Education should be upstanding citizens setting an example. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Laura.
Hey, stop.
No.
Let's see, it says stop.
Lindy Schwartz. Are you good?
Nice guy.
Can I take this off? Thank you. Hello, my name is Cindy Schwartz, and I live at 1417 Tierney Drive. As the BOE discusses how to move forward with the DEI committee, I believe you were speaking about that tonight, I implore all of you to consider reopening the application process for members of the DEI. I believe that the DEI committee has the potential to do great things. Many of the members are well-intentioned and are bringing light to issues that we can combat together. However, due to the rhetoric of a couple of individuals currently on the committee, the DEI is viewed by many as divisive and harmful. The DEI's potential is being stunted by this toxicity. There are numerous examples of repugnant comments publicly made by these individuals on a regular basis. Just today, one of these individuals posted on Facebook, and I quote, I say this with all intentionality and clarity. F. Christopher Columbus. Except he used the F word, and I'm not going to do that here now. And then he continued, I will go one step further. Anyone Italian who is lauding Christopher Columbus because they wanted to commemorate an Italian is clueless and bordering on immoral. I'm not defending Christopher Columbus, and whether you agree with that history or not, this language is divisive. He could have chosen to talk about Indigenous People Day, but instead he preaches hate. And this is just one of so many examples. It's almost on a daily basis. Bethany, I guess she left, she had some really great points about how the DEI committee can help our children and help our community be kind. This is the opposite of kind. This breeds hate and divisiveness. This is a poor representation of the committee and what they are trying to accomplish. And as a minority, I feel that these individuals are not working in my best interest or the best interest of others with diverse backgrounds. Our community and most of the DEI is suffering from this negativity. We need a committee that is going to unify and be a positive influence now more than ever. My suggestion, if the board wants the DEI committee to continue its work in our schools, is to rebrand and accept new applicants. And with this, I believe that the committee can garner more support and has a better chance for success. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Ted, are we good?
Yeah, if they don't fall over, I assume they're
Hey, that's the secret. Nicole Madonia?
Good evening. Thank you to those of you who have replied to my emails. I have been a parent in this district for 13 years. I have a junior high student and a high schooler. I'm a mother and a nurse here to advocate for masks to be optional for my children once the county mandate expires. I am the child of a math teacher, so I like some numbers and data. Dane County has the lowest COVID rate of any county in the state. 8 is the number of students in our school district that tested positive for COVID last week out of 4,400. 12, the number of students that were in quarantine last week out of our district out of 4,400. 0, that's an exciting number, the number of staff that tested positive for COVID last week or were in quarantine, 0. 77%, that's the number of citizens in our Waunakee Community School District, according to the Dane County Public Health website, that are vaccinated with at least one shot against COVID. So we're doing a lot of good things. 3 to 5 days, that's the incubation period for the Delta variant. Why do I bring up 3 to 5 days? The kids were here talking about homecoming. It happened a couple weeks ago. We know that the kids were not perfect with masking. We know they're not perfect in masking in the high school, the junior high, high school, and even the younger kids, but we're not seeing school spread. I would suggest, at least for my children, junior high and high school, that's because a lot of them are likely vaccinated, but we're continuing to make them mask. We have no metrics for when that's going to stop. We have no medical ad hoc committee meetings scheduled for when the mandate expires and the plan for what we're going to do. It's been suggested that one of the metrics might be when the 12 and unders can be vaccinated, but a metric needs to be quantitative, it needs to be measurable. You know, my students compromised and stayed home when younger students were able to go back to in-person learning. Why can't we consider a compromise and let the junior high and high school kids be mask optional? Why don't we consider a compromise that was suggested last month, that why not mask during passing times when we're crowded and let them take the mask off when they're in the classrooms? These kids that are junior high and high school, my children that I'm advocating for, they don't just go home after school. They're in activities, they have jobs. They have to wear masks there too. My son wore a mask for 8 hours in school last week and then went to work a job for 6 hours, wearing a mask for 14 hours. So it's not just in school they're having to wear these masks. You know, one of my students said to me that some kids like the mask. So I said, you know, is it because they're afraid of catching COVID? And he said, it's because some kids with their self-esteem, they think they look better if they wear the mask. And just think about that. That's not why we want our students to be wearing masks. I would suggest, or I ask the board, to come up with some clearly defined metrics and consider the option of letting the 12 and overs go mask optional in the interim as soon as the mask mandate expires.
Thank you, Nicole. Give you a minute? 30 seconds? John Nettie is next.
I take this off because it steams up my glasses. I wanted to say I'm John Nitty. I've been here before. I have 2 kids in the district. I recently attended the DEI community engagement session, and with an open mind, and I sat there and listened, and I gleaned a couple of things. There's a lot of fuzzy, felicitous language being thrown about, and one of the things also was that these assurances that to us, to the parents that have concerns, that critical race theory, whatever you want to call it, is not going to be taught or is not taught under the guise of equity. But it's very difficult to accept that for many reasons. And first, let's sort of have a little history of what's going on in our society. First of all, we know that teachers' unions have zealously advocated for critical race theory, irrespective of parents' wishes. We also know that there are thousands of teachers in Wisconsin and elsewhere in the country that have vowed in writing to contravene any laws prescribing the teaching of critical race theory. Equally disturbing is that Education Secretary Miguel Cardona refused to acknowledge that parents are primary stakeholders in their children's education. Also, Virginia gubernatorial candidate Terry McAuliffe recently proclaimed that parents should not be able to tell schools what to teach. The National School Board Association, after being pressured by teachers' unions, went so far as to demand that the FBI arrest angry parents upset about their public schools curriculum and to label them domestic terrorists. After receiving this pressure, Attorney General Merrick Garland ordered the FBI to investigate and monitor parents who dare exercise their First Amendment rights to question the various school boards' sanctioning of such indoctrination. It turns out that Merrick Garland's son owns a company that sells critical race theory materials to schools. Additionally, learned that various national teachers' unions influence the CDC on school policies regarding COVID-19. More locally, a Waunakee Board of Education member and former one and a current DEI ad hoc committee member declared on his blog, "I'm sorry, the professionals who set the curriculum know better than 4,400 children's parents. To suggest that parents need effective input over what public schools teach is an absurd level of entitlement." Under that kind of background and history, how can you expect parents who are skeptical to believe a word that is being said? The pressures of the unions come from the top down. We know that's the case. Is that the end?
Yeah.
All right. Let me just say, equity, this notion of equity, is a created construct that does not exist in the Constitution. Equality exists in the Constitution. And I am an advocate and always have been for Martin Luther King's salutary teaching that we we ascribe to a colorblind society and judge people on the content of their character and not the color of their skin.
Thank you, John. Eric Pierce.
All right. I'm choosing a different chair. Just trying to be different. Hi there, my name is Eric. I want to make a comment. To those that support DEI and the ad hoc committee, I want to say this. Most of us supported 95% of what was covered in that community engagement session at the PAC. We want a welcome and diverse Waunakee too. But here's what we don't agree with or support. A small number of people pushing a radical ideological agenda. On one hand, we were told this DEI effort is to create a welcoming and fair Waunakee. It's all flowers and rainbows, and we're told categorically that CRT or radical racialized indoctrination is not occurring. Okay. But on that other hand, we have this fringe pushing a radical agenda Not openly, of course, but sneaking in new approaches, weaving it into staff training to provide new perspectives. In large part, I believe this is being done through these partnerships being pushed. We are told these partnerships are nonpartisan, and although some of these organizations might have controversial content on their website and media platforms, that doesn't mean they'll be teaching that here. I'm sorry, that's a load of BS. If you are an organization, you create content to put on your website, YouTube channel, Facebook page, whatever, you're going to showcase the values and what's important to you. So you have to own that content. We are repeatedly assured these views aren't being brought into Waunakee schools. However, I'd rather these radical organizations be denied access to my children or their teachers from the get-go. Now, there's a bunch of these controversial partnerships, but I only have 3 minutes. Let's talk about WPEN. They openly support CRT with a CRT info sheet on their website and YouTube videos defending actual CRT, not just whatever. There's video of their teacher training sessions where CRT-like principles are being taught. We've heard laughable claims that this CRT info sheet is not openly supporting CRT, but it's just providing information and definitions. That sheet makes several assertions that are essentially CRT talking points. And there's even a section called How to Respond to People Who Are Advocating Against CRT. Number 2 is just to deny it exists. I'm sorry, but if you don't see this as pro-CRT, especially with WPEN's other online platforms openly supporting CRT, then your political pendulum is so far to one side that you cannot see clearly. Another partnership is this Origins Developmental Designs. Their website openly supports CRT's principles, like the theory of systemic racism, and cites Ibram X. Kendi dozens of times. He's one of the foremost supporters and promoters of CRT. Yet another very radical organization that we are partnering with. The list goes on. Now, what if I proposed Waunakee schools partner with an organization like the NRA? That was formed decades ago to promote youth education around gun safety. And if we asked them to provide advocacy and staff training on just our education system, so long as they promise not to introduce pro-gun content, would any of you trust that partnership? Probably a fair assumption is that they weave in some pro-gun stuff in there somewhere. So why are you trying your darndest to convince us CRT isn't in the schools, yet turn around and then push partnerships with organizations that openly support CRT or the principles that make it up? It's this inconsistency that has many of us scratching our heads. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie Larson.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak tonight. I have a couple of kids in the elementary school here in Waunakee. I was able to attend the community engagement meeting on September 27th. I know we were all heartbroken to hear some of the stories of the kids being bullied and called racial slurs. I think these students are looking for answers and that they think the DEI has the solution. I wanted to learn more about the DEI, and I listened to their committee meeting from September 21st. What I heard at the meeting seemed to set a different precedence than what was presented to the community. Part of their definition of diversity says what makes each of us unique and is about recognizing, respecting, and valuing differences. The committee then went on to speak very negatively of parents in our district who disagreed with some of the committee's beliefs and ideas. Parents were called hate-filled. There were other comments about needing harsher moderation and even police presence when the public is allowed to speak. There seemed to be a goal of censoring people. This rhetoric goes against their written definition of diversity to be about respecting and valuing differences. They also talked about terms they would like to introduce to the community in phase 1 of their plan. They called these terms less risky, such as race, majority, and minority. Here's a quote of what they would like to do next. Quote, "Then after that, you add another layer of those things. You talk about white privilege." Another quote was, "As an Asian person, I have more privilege than perhaps a black man does." Saying that some races are more privileged than others perpetuates the false belief that one skin color is better than another. I know many parents would be disheartened to hear this type of belief coming from the DEI members. My family and I love and treat people equally, no matter their skin color, race, political party, or beliefs. We totally reject the idea that skin color makes some people more valuable than others. I am pleading with the school board to not teach this to our kids. I have concerns that the community isn't being shown the full plans of the DEI. With all that I've said, I don't see how the DEI has the right answers for our problems of bullying, name-calling, and racial slurs in Waunakee schools. I think that they think they are doing something good, but I see major flaws with their solutions to the problems. If the DEI continues, we have to revamp the committee to include community members with diverse political and social values. Many parents in this community feel the same as I do, and we don't feel represented in the DEI community. Committee, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Gabrielle Stanley.
Hi, I'm Gabrielle Stanley, and I have a son that's a sophomore in high school. So I wanted to bring back the issue of the masks. When the Dane County, can we, as a board, send messages that we would request to not have mask mandates, being that it's obvious around the country we are seeing that the mask mandates aren't making a difference. We have more communities of not having them than having them, and there's more risks. And this board hasn't discussed or represented the risk side of the masks after the medical hawk meeting, where in our community we had a teacher that was taping the mask to the child's face, and we had also a child in our community that had a staph infection on his nose, which a staph infection could eat away your skin and need plastic surgery, go to your nasal system, cause could cause death, staph infections. So there is a real risk with masks, but just because Dane County has written that the mandate, that we're abiding by it, but I feel like the risks are being ignored because there's a mandate. And maybe we need to act like an independent community looking at our community risks, because those two issues right there, those would make national headlines of masks being taped on a child's face, staph infection on their nose. And so ignoring those kind of issues is, I think, one of our problems with this community, of ignoring problems and just thinking that they go away instead of actually looking at those issues and finding solutions. And then also, I put in a request to get a list of the library books for the last 2 years, and I haven't had any response to that. So can we have a listing to the community to what new books have entered our libraries for our students? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Dan Feldmeyer.
Hello, my name is Dan Feldmeyer. I've been here over 30 years. And I think I talk about what a lot of other people are talking about. I personally believe every human has intrinsic value. This means everyone should be treated with respect, and we should judge others on the content of their character and not the color of their skin. In other words, I strongly agree with some of the things the DEI committee is trying to do. With this in mind, I've been thinking about why is there so much pushback on the DEI committee and the recommendations. The answer comes down to one word: trust. The board did not get diversity of thought on the DEI committee, and therefore everyone on the right in the center of the political aisle does not trust what the committee has done or plans to do. We look at the 43 action steps and try to figure out what they mean, because there is no one on the committee that we trust enough to say what they really want to do. Mike Brandt wrote on Facebook, the idea of diversity of thought is moronic. He was saying that if the committee had diversity of thought, they would have to have a deep conversation on issues and then compromise on solutions. It appears he thinks it's much better to have a group that have groupthink so the DEI committee can get things done quicker, which it can. The problem is almost half the community has no reason to trust what comes out of the DEI committee. Mike wanted a club, not a committee. Looking from the outside, it appears the committee took a survey developed by far-left teachers union, which they described, and answered the questions to the best of their ability, with maybe some input from some of their left-leaning friends. They compiled this data and came up with the action steps. 70% of these action steps I would have expected the left-leaning group to come up with before they even met. Indoctrination training for everyone connected to the school, incentivize BIPOC teachers to get them in the school district, restorative justice and add no or zero tolerance, etc. Another issue the DEI committee wants people to believe is it's if you support the 7 overarching principles, that we agree with their action items. I call the 7 overarching principles unicorns and butterflies. They're all beautiful, nice, and something everyone can support. There are such things as conditions at schools foster positive climates that support teaching and learning for educators and students. Sounds wonderful. As the saying goes, the devil is in the details, and that is true in this case. I listened to the DEI committee meeting on September 21st, and this is what they said about the public meeting at the BOE meeting. The chair said, very hostile.
30 seconds.
All the toxicity, and later even said, even if you hate us adults, we don't hate us adults. And the other member said, I feel a lot of hate, and I know they are looking for a fight. This is not hate. This is a lack of trust because the committee did not represent different views, and based on Mike's comments on Facebook, I don't think that was an accident. I expect the board to do better for the future DEI. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Robert McPherson?
This one you can stand. Okay. Robert McPherson, I live at 1703 Alexandria Court. Sorry, I know let's do that in the village. So I'm here tonight mostly to talk pro DEI. I do want to throw in a quick comment about masking. As a father of a 5-year-old who cannot get a vaccine, fully appreciate that we have masks. I know that if it wasn't for the mask mandate, we might be having a much different conversation right now with lawyers involved, so I'm just appreciative that we've continued to keep that in force. So speaking on DEI, I once again want to laud the BOE for hosting the listening session. I had to sit, I've listened to the comments tonight. It's a pleasure going almost last. I've heard a lot said about WPEN. I would point out that WPEN has information about critical race theory, the scary word of the night. And it talks about how to deal with public situations where people are coming and talking about critical race theory because most people don't know what it means. And I'm feeling most of us don't know either. I don't. I didn't go to law school, so I didn't learn it there. But what I will say is that, the community coming out here, I'm clearly outnumbered, saying that WPEN is pushing some sort of weird agenda. It's not. In fact, if it was, I'm pretty sure that they would lose their nonprofit status if they were engaged in those types of political activities. They just want to help us get more money for, like was discussed last meeting, special education funds so that it doesn't come out of taxpayer funds. Local taxpayer funds. The other item that I'd like to address on that is that, if we're so afraid of the BOE being involved with WPEN, I'd like to point out that there is a board member on here who is a part of the No Better Friend Corporation, which is a political action committee, which is funded by the Heritage Foundation. It's extremely conservative. It pushes for a lot of conservative things. That is political. You want to know what political is? Look that up. If you want to know what, a political thing advocating for students, WPEN, vote for it. Get it out there. We need all the funding money we can get because Waunakee is going to keep creating new tax incentive districts, tax incremental districts and taking more tax funds away from the school district. Now, as far as finishing up here on DEI, because I'm pretty sure I'm running low on time, I just want to state that as a proud religious minority, I am Jewish. I know that there is not any representation at the school board level of that religion, and it has led me to ask questions. Randy got my question at the committee meeting, asking why we get off Good Friday, but we didn't take off Yom Kippur. It's not that I have anything against Good Friday, and I don't think we should have for Yom Kippur either. I think we shouldn't have off for any religious holidays beyond the federally mandated ones, which we all enjoy Christmas. So I'm not going to complain. Now, as far as DEI goes, though, for all the talk about Facebook and things that Mike Brandt said on there, yes, he is very coarse, but he has his right as a private citizen to make those comments. He is not a BOE member anymore. There are people who serve on village boards that send some pretty scathing emails to the Board of Education that the public just doesn't see. Mike wears his heart on his sleeve. I'm not going to apologize for him. But what I'm going to say on that, though, is that this committee is going to do good, and we just can't be afraid of having these tough conversations. And when we seek to change it because of ideologies, we're just not going to get anywhere because we're going to argue over what is the ideology rather than moving forward with anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And that concludes the public comments, and I just want to thank each of you for the respect you showed tonight and the conversation and the input that you gave us tonight. I do appreciate that, and I just appreciate the decorum that we had during that time, so thank you. Moving back to the agenda, we have teacher update. Oh, I'm sorry, absolutely. Cass, come on forward.
Standing room only.
Standing room only. You get the whole floor.
Oh, gee, thanks. Thank you for this last minute entry, I guess. I first of all want to congratulate the board on being courageous enough to tackle something that is clearly as divisive, even though it shouldn't be, as DEI. I certainly appreciate the many community members that have, including very many board members, that have reached out and tried to learn and help implement some things. I'm not quite sure why this is such a divisive issue. And it's funny that a speaker before me brought up the prospect of trust. And trust is kind of a two-way street. I trust the educators that teach our kids. I trust the administration that is in charge of those folks. I trust the board. They are elected to their positions. I trust them to do what is in the best interest of all of our children, just as much as I hope that other parents that speak are looking at not only what's in the benefit of their own children, but mine as well, just as I look at the benefit of their children. And so there are issues wrapped within DEI that do not affect me or my child personally, that I certainly have been advocating or pushing or been interested in seeing happen within this school district for a great many years. And so some of you, we've been having long talks for a long time, and that's why we're not strangers. Because instead of going to a public forum, like, I don't know, social media, Facebook, when there have been issues, I brought those issues directly to the board or usually to the administration, but I started even with the teachers and addressed those issues if I had concerns or anything, and I've done that for years. Or maybe it was the principals of the building. I don't know where along the way we stopped doing that and why we think that social media should dictate, but I really feel like the last forum that we had around the whole prospect of DEI, I thought that was very productive. I thought there was a lot of give and take. I'm not a fan of this public forum thing where people get to kind of just say whatever off the top of their head and not be able to get some response back. I'm hopeful that we are going to go back to that, going back to not this us versus them type of situation, that we're going to start all of us, start acting like a community around common unity. And the one thing that we should have common unity about is what is best for all of our kids. And that means if even one child is being hurt by something that is happening or not happening in our school district, I would darn sure hope that every single parent would be as outraged as if it were their own. I'm sorry. Just as I have been outraged on behalf of children that are not my own, that I did not give birth to, that I have sat here and talked to different, and some of you administrators know this, for years, and did it behind the scenes without having to make a grandstand for live stream or sneak into secret groups and betray trust by sharing things that should not have been shared publicly ever. Trust is a two-way street. So I thank you all very much for the work that you are trying to do. I know it's not easy, and you've all of you have been very unfairly attacked for trying to do this work. And I appreciate that you're all doing what you think is best given the circumstances. And I hope that we're going to all finally come together and rally around together for the benefit of all of our kids.
Thank you, Kat.
Thank you.
I like that message. All right. Now we are done with our public comments. Thank you. And we have Kyle and Ann, or no. Gina. I'm so used to saying Kyle and Ashley. Sorry, Gina. It's Gina and Ashley this year.
It's a new show.
It's a new show. New year, new show.
So this week is very busy for the educators in our district as it's parent or family teacher conference week. I think middle school and high school teachers are just about wrapping up their conferences now. Primary schools are tomorrow, intermediate's Thursday, and then it's district-wide on Friday. So that's always nice to share and give updates about our amazing students with their caregivers. We'd also like to acknowledge that today is National Coming Out Day, and we want our students, their families, and our colleagues to know that we see them, we care about them, and we support them.
We'd also like to acknowledge that today is Indigenous Peoples Day and that our schools are on the Ho-Chunk ancestral land. We thank the district for beginning their work to respectfully honor people of the Ho-Chunk Nation and the other 11 First Nations of Wisconsin through its rebranding process. We recognize the powerful step that was taken towards more equitable and inclusive schools via the community engagement session at the end of October, or September, getting ahead of myself. Fall break is coming. So thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick
Absolutely.
question? There's been a lot of discussion about virtual versus in-person on the parent-teacher conferences. I remember last year there was some talk that there was a lot more participation by parents due to the virtual nature. Did we see that continue? Was it better?
I will say that at the elementary level, participation has always been fantastic. I'm not at the secondary level, but I do believe that just communication is maybe done a different way more often. I believe that more parents are attending in Zoom because you need to sign up for a slot versus waiting in line for a turn to speak with teachers. I know as an EL teacher, it made it really difficult for interpreters to kind of wait in line with families and then, trying to schedule it out. Really, it does help. As far as in-person versus virtual, I think you'll hear arguments on both sides. I don't know that there's one great answer. Gina, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would just say that we're thankful for the feedback about how last year went, and obviously we're willing to try that again this year. I also recognize that the communication is tricky when there's lots of different teachers. For example, I'm a specialist, so you scheduled a time with your homeroom teacher, and then you got a separate email from me with my link. So if folks have feedback about streamlining any of that, we're all ears.
But we provided both options.
As far as I know, I remember that my principal mentioned that if there were some in-person ones that she needed to know when they were scheduled. So yes, it's my understanding. None with me, so yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there are any committee or any board members that would like to share any trainings or conferences at this point.
I attended the homecoming parade, and it was great to see it back, and it looked like the high school and staff and booster clubs really got involved this year and really had a great time.
Yeah,
So
I also popped in, and there was a lot of people on the streets. Yeah, it was fun.
I think there were some families that helped us with that. I know, Katie, I think you and some other folks were kind of behind trying to get a little larger focus with that, and worked with Mr. Hutenberg and Mr. Borowski and such, so thank you.
Thank you.
It was fun. Yeah, it was good. Moving on to COVID update and our current dashboard data. Somebody had contacted me about including previous weeks on the dashboard data, and I believe Annie was able to do that today. Thank you, Annie. So I know a few community members had asked me about getting some pre-data, not just 1 week.
If you just want to pull it, yeah, I can do it, that's how easier. Those of you who've taken a look at our website, this just kind of gives you an idea of what's happened over the last week. A few people have already referenced this tonight. You can see that we have 0 staff positive, 0 staff in quarantine. We had 8 positive COVID students last week and 12 students in quarantine. So if you were a student who was positive, that's not included in the quarantine numbers. Those are additional numbers. But I would say as many of the quarantine pieces are not related to school. I mean, I would say that those are also related to siblings, other contacts that they had, or being a close contact through other activities or within their household. That's where the majority of those have come from and where we have those type of quarantines. If I go to the next, where am I going, Rebecca?
The upper left-hand corner arrow.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Well,
No,
yeah.
I closed it, sorry. I'll
Oh.
let you run it.
Just, yeah.
Sorry. There we go. Since the beginning of the year, this gives you an idea of what this looks like on a cumulative basis. So we've had 9 positive staff, 1 staff in quarantine from being considered a close contact. We've had 55 students who've turned positive, and we've had 78 kids in quarantine. Again, many of our quarantines may be a close contact to somebody at school, but also most of them, I would say, are close contacts because of other types of activities or within a household. I mean, the piece that I think when we talk about, and I don't really want to get into kind of the mask piece, but it is getting into kind of that quarantine requirements that we have to follow. I mean, one of the things that we have to make sure we're doing is our due diligence. And that's a piece that there is a state law out there that does give us immunity from some level of litigation against the school district for COVID. But it still means you still have to have kind of reasonable accommodations and things that you're doing to move forward with mitigation efforts. Some of the things that we have tried, as I've shared with the board in the past, is our goal is to try to keep kids in school. And I think we've been able to do a good job with that. It's multiple mitigation efforts across our district. When you start to take a look at, if we'd have utilized these numbers last year, our quarantines would be in several hundreds. I mean, and I would say probably close to like 700, 800, 900, because you'd be knocking out, for every middle school and high school student, we were taking out 30 kids last year. So one person was 30 students. At an elementary level, anywhere from the kindergarten through the 6th grade level, every student was quarantining around 24 kids. So when you start to take a look at kind of where we're at now comparatively to where we were, and some of the challenges we had and the frustrations with all the quarantine pieces in the spring, I think that just the efforts that are in place right now are allowing us to meet our goal of trying to keep kids in school. So let's talk, and I know Jack, you had mentioned at one point, let's talk about kind of what our local data is. So Rebecca, if you can just pull up the...
Hey Randy, one quick question on this. So we've got 7 positive cases and 8 quarantines. Are those quarantines part of the 7?
They're separate.
They're separate.
They're separate.
Okay, just to clarify.
Yep, so yeah, so this 7 is not part of the 8.
Okay.
All right. Let me go here. The board has this in its packet. I'm going to try to bring you up here to see what you're actually looking at. This is actually kind of the extrapolated data. This is today, October 11th. It shows that we had 2 positive cases as of this morning when DHS released this. They release this information on a daily basis, usually in the afternoon. You can pull it up. This is on the geographic area of the school district. If you take a look at what that average is over 7 days, right now that's 5 people per day averaged over 7 days. This is 7 days worth of data. You ranged anywhere from a 2 to an 11. That's kind of the range over that 7 days. Your average is 5. So what does that actually mean? And I think people have talked about metrics. I think many of my colleagues in other districts are utilizing a lot of the CDC community transmission metrics. I mean, what that number is actually looking at, get it under my sliders here, is actually this number way over here. Let me blow it up. It's the 7-day new case average per 100,000. So in our community of our geographic area of Waunakee, we have about 20,000 residents. So if you take that 5 times 7, that'll give you your total for the week, or for the week, and then you multiply that by 5 to get to 100,000. You generally get to this 173, 175 area. That's what that number means. But the number really doesn't give you an idea of what's going on. So what I'm going to do is just remember that number. You can see it's kind of bounced around a bit here. It's been as high as in the 200s. We've been, if you go way back, we've trended in different areas just below 100. But this is really data since school started. So let me go back to here. Do you have the other one that looks like this?
Yes. I think you want this one.
Oops, thank you. And this is one we've shown before. I'm just going to take a look at really this level here. This is that number that I showed you on the far side of the spreadsheet, the 173. And what they're showing, and this is kind of what public health talks about, and what a lot of our districts are following around the state, is what are your levels of community transmission within your community? And anything over 100 is considered high transmission. Now we're at 173. When you go back to summer school, where we went to mask optional, we were down in this area. We were at about 0.27 cases per day. And that was extrapolating out to the highs, 8s, low 9s as far as low transmission. So when our summer was when we were having kids mask optional, which a lot of kids were doing during summer school, we were able to really manage as far as not having to quarantine many kids and allowing kids to participate. So one of the metrics we do watch, and at least what I can feel is as our numbers in the community go up, we can feel it in the school. Our contact tracers are busy. They are working and really connecting in with families, particularly as kids have symptoms, etc. I mean, the stuff that's gone through school with regards to allergies or colds, I mean, my family's experienced that as well. I will follow up on some of the feedback that we received from our students tonight as far as some of those aspects on quarantine. And our goal is to try to keep kids in school. These are the things that we're going to continue to watch. And my hope is that these numbers can find their way back down so that we can get to a point where we don't have the mask mandates and we can find our way to pieces moving forward. But right now we are looking at the high transmission rate. We're at 173. Anything over 100 is considered high. Those numbers rose very quickly. My hope is that there's a point in time where they will also drop. So trying to look at what's your metric, I think it's kind of an issue of looking at community transmission, and then also, as we've discussed here previously, talking internally as far as what are we experiencing in school, how many kids are we seeing impacted, how do we make sure that we can keep kids in school and move forward. I think we showed that we could do it this summer. My hope is we can get those numbers down and do that again. So that's really the update as far as the COVID pieces. There's been a couple questions with regards to the masking order. That's from Dane County. That is in effect until November 5th. In working with the county, they have articulated that they will, if they are going to extend that, they would let us know that before that date. So I think someone mentioned that this would be a topic for the November board meeting. I think certainly this is going to be a topic that we'll be continuing to update the community on what's happening, and if there's any shifts within the order, that'll obviously be a piece that we discuss as well.
Randy, when you talk to your peer districts, when, is really, are there any schools under that 100?
Not that I'm aware of right now. No.
Is this an open session where I can ask a question?
No. Yeah. I haven't looked at that, Jack, to be able to answer that. So, I mean,
it'd be interesting to, as we listen to some of the public, how does Dane County, Waunakee compare to some of these that have mask optionals?
Right. I think when I looked at CDC today, like the state of Wisconsin's over, ours is 173. Dane County was like 170 today, and I think the state of Wisconsin was 300 and something. I mean, you got to, and I think part of what we've talked about in the past is you kind of look at these as a guide. It's not you get to hear, and this, you got to look at kind of all of the different efforts that we have to make sure, how do we operate the best as a school system? And I think that's just one piece of data.
No, and I totally agree with you, Randy. You gotta look at it as a system.
Yeah.
You know, we are in Dane County very vaccinated. You know, we're leading, you know, the state of Wisconsin, if not the nation, as far as vaccination rates. And, you know, I think where some of the frustration comes is, you know, we've done the hard work, you know, to do that. And, you know, we look at these metrics, which, you know, I'm not a doctor, but, you know, I don't see those coming down anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so what that means is we'll be in mask mandate for the rest of the year.
That I hope not, Jack. I mean, I don't think any of us want to be there. I mean,
Right.
I have hope that, I mean, the numbers did drop last year. I mean, I think that I'm hoping that, I mean, you're right, we are highly vaccinated. I think somebody said 77%. The last time I looked, it was 74, so it's right within that. That's including, in that number, part of the end number is all of our kids who aren't even eligible.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that is a very high number, and I believe just through our work with our students at the high school, we have a highly vaccinated population, middle school and high school. It's part of what, when you start to look at some of the things, and this is a conversation we have to have as we move forward here, beyond the mandate pieces, is I believe that a lot of kids, particularly at middle school and high school, as they're being contact traced, if they are vaccinated, they're not quarantined.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a piece that's definitely been a positive for us to be able to keep kids in school. So that was part of why we ran some of the clinics last year, to encourage families that were interested in the vaccine to do it, because we knew we could help keep our students in school.
But I think one of the things that we have to do, I think we all see that the vaccine works. And we've got to look at policies and metrics, you know, once the K-6 comes out, you know, give them some time where we can get, parents can get their kids vaccinated. And so we got to start thinking, because it's great if everybody was vaccinated.
Right.
And I think our parents, I applaud our parents and, you know, administration and everybody that's really encouraged getting vaccinations. And, you know, hopefully we can move away from the masks.
Agreed. I don't think there's any argument on that side. So that concludes, if there's no other questions, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Randy. Moving on to committee reports, starting with our DEI committee that met on the 7th, on the 21st. I don't know.
I was not able to be there.
You weren't there.
There was no action.
There was no action, I know.
I think they were just mainly, were you there? They were mainly just discussing what came out of the community engagement.
It was part.
Oh, it was? The minutes are in there.
Yeah, so I think I'd like to move on to the other agenda items under this topic, and that is really to have a board discussion about the future of our DEI ad hoc committee, where we want to go with that. We've kind of had that committee kind of pause their work over the last couple of weeks. We had the community engagement 2 weeks ago. And I think it's time that we have that discussion around the board. Where do we want to go with this? How do we want to revamp it if we want to have it? So would people just be willing to kind of share around, give me a 3 to 5 minute synopsis of where they feel about the DEI and where they might see it heading?
Sure.
Ted.
So, with it being started before I was on the board, I wanted to look back in the history a little bit of it. You know, I go back to meetings, that's why I just printed out. And I'm sure there are plenty that are involved with that type of topic prior to making public comments. But I see public comments being made February 10th, 2020. 2 people commented on it. The very next month, 3 people commented on it. And on top of that, an agenda was already set. A charter was made for that committee by one of the board members. In a month, the charter was made. The comments on that were, this was introduced, here's the outline right here. The board had a good discussion on the possibilities of the committee. A motion was made and seconded to establish the ad hoc committee as outlined with details to be worked out at the policy committee. Policy committee has not met since February of this year that this was done. So the policy committee never met, from what I could see on notes, to determine what that should be made up of. And so I think that's what a lot of probably concern is from community, where this was set up and run without input from, I mean, people on the board can speak differently, but I know there were board members on it, but it says right there that it's going to be worked out in the policy committee. Policy committee did not meet. So a couple comments were made about trust. One, I've made comments on trust before a couple meetings ago. I trust parents, and beyond that, I have a hard time trusting anything, and that's really disappointing, but it's the reality right now. So I know that people have great intentions about stuff. Some people don't. And I can't make that determination, but you always have to be on guard. And that is what the reasonable questions that are being asked. And when we try to dodge that with certain things like this is happening, this isn't happening, that worries me. So in terms of this continuing on, I see, in my own opinion, obviously that's what it's going to be, but everything that's being talked about on the committee touches the different committees anyway. It could be facility stuff. If we're talking ADA things, we're looking at that. It could be policy stuff. It could, all of these things, it feels like it needs to go back to the committee to vote on anyway, the things related to diversity, equity, inclusion. So I don't know how you'd have a separate standing committee to come out of that and then, we got to go back to the board to deal with it on that. So continue with having this type of committee and have that membership be more representative, but why couldn't it be a community thing? That's also what the public comments were about this. The community should be doing this.
Yeah.
Go ahead, that's great, and that should report back to the board, just like the teachers maybe do.
Yeah, good idea.
So, that's mine.
Anybody else want to share their thoughts?
Well, I think that's no different than sitting on co-curriculars. If there's a policy change for co-curriculars, we don't deal with it in co-curriculars, we deal with it in policy. I think that there's a lot of crossover with stuff like that. If there's a new stadium going up or something like that, it goes to facilities and budget and stuff like that, even though it may be talked about at co-curriculars, but it bounces around. It never stays really at one because it's sort of all encompassing. We've had this goals committee around too. Policy hasn't met a whole lot. Goals committee hasn't had a lot to do as well. My suggestion would be we dissolve the goals committee and make a standing committee for the DEI. My concern with the DEI committee is it's not focused enough. And I think this first year, that's the reality of it, is because it was so broad. But I think now they came out with some suggestions. If we have a standing committee where we actually have board members running the meeting, keeping everything on task, but we still have committee members out on this. It's not just a standing committee where it's us and administration, and we can open it up to community members as well to be on that, a certain number of students, community members, staff, to be able to run that. I think it would flow better. I think we would have more control of it. I didn't like sometimes the flow I saw and I listened to on these committee meetings, how they got off topic, how it was more emotional than actual setting a task and trying to find it. And I think if we're going to move forward with something like this with DEI, us as a board need to say, that's great, you came up with 6 or something like that, but out of that 6, here's one task we want you to do for the next 6 months or 3 months or something like that. And to be able to work on it with a time frame. I know you like that, Jack, with the time ending part of it. So I think it's needed. I think we can clean it up. I think we need to come through with new members, new leadership. But thank the people that have already done a lot of work this year. But I think if we control it from the board perspective, we can clean it up a lot bit and make sure that it's focused on a task that can be accomplished. We can skip it.
No, I think, I think when we look at the DEI committee or any ad hoc committee, it shouldn't be a standing committee. It should be a committee that the board puts together and says, we don't have time as a board to handle, this challenge or that challenge. And there's a specific goal that we go to the community and say, hey, let's round you up and this is what we want you to work with. And what that does is really puts focus around it. I don't, as Brian has said, I don't think there was focus. It's like, okay, let's set up this committee and we'll figure out where the committee goes over time. I thank the people that were on the committee. We asked them for a report. They gave us a report. What we should be doing with that report is divvying that up with the different committees and say, how do we handle that? How do we handle those issues? But going forward, we're just keeping an ad hoc committee. I'm not in favor of. I like the idea that came out of the meeting that we had on DEI, where this should be a community discussion, over time, and maybe we charge administration, to with some board input, to have those community meetings, because it's not just the school system, it's also the community that has to come together around some of these issues. I'm a little, obviously, we've read or some of us have read the Waunakee Tribune, where teachers don't know how to respond to some of this. I'm not sure that is always the case. It may be where a student didn't articulate to the teacher. I think we've got some good teachers here that really understand, how to handle those issues. But I think, going forward, I don't believe that we should have a continuing ad hoc committee around this. We should have community engagement, and not only DEI, but other topics as well that are of importance to the community.
Thank you, Jim. Dave, or I'll turn to...
Looking at it, I agree that a long-term ad hoc committee is not a good idea. I also think volunteer committees are one of the hardest things to ever organize, run, and deal with, having been on way too many of them. And making it a standing committee of the board would be the long-term answer. By doing that, when we look at our committees that we run now, between facilities or curriculum or co-curricular or whatever, we have people in-house, administrative-wise, that set and help design agendas and make sure that things that are needed to get to. With a volunteer committee with volunteer leadership, it's hard to do that, because you're asking somebody to do that on their personal time, in private, quite often not being within the buildings and having the resources to set things like that up, especially the resource material behind running a committee. By making it a standing committee, whether you wipe out the goals committee or you just add another committee, I think then you'll have the resources to help do it. I've talked with some other school board people from around the state who do stuff like this. There's a lot of different ways to run board committees. Board committees don't have to be only school board members. That's the way we've been doing it. But maybe this is one committee we should do different, where we do our 2 or 3 board members like usual, but we also appoint community members to that committee. Because a committee like this, it's about the inclusivity, it's about actual events that happen in school and finding better ways to deal with them. What those students said at that community engagement meeting was incredible. We don't hear those stories on a regular basis sitting here in this room. And it's hard, you know, to always hear that from those kids that it's happening to. I thought the 2 student members on that committee were some of the best voices during a lot of the discussion. And a couple of those students have asked to be on the DEI committee as it reforms, and I think we need them there. But we need a committee that has the resources and the agenda and the ability to function on a real basis, not just run by volunteers. And we need a committee that's inclusive of the community and the students and the schools in a way that we hear more than just 7 board members. So I advocate for your proposal of the idea of making it a standing committee and making it be inclusive of the community and the schools as a whole.
Thank you. Judy or Mark, do you want to weigh in here? Mark's mute is off, so let's take Mark first, Judy. Oh, we can't hear you.
I think I'm as high as I can go.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. A lot of really good thoughts shared tonight by all my fellow board members. I agree with pieces of each of them, and probably my biggest one is we certainly do need this committee in some form. I would suggest one possibility, an important one, is to limit the scope possibly to student needs and issues. When I was at the engagement meeting Monday night, that was my thought of what we needed before this whole thing began. I knew we had students that weren't being treated well, that felt they didn't have complete access as others did to our programming. And so to have the committee focus on those students would seem to make the most sense to me, and potentially combine the responsibility of the structural issues, you might call them the focus points 5 through 7, maybe 3 as well, on 2 of our committees on the school board, possibly curriculum and goals, or goals and policy, because those are really things we have access to, and I think it was our job to take care of, not the committee. I'd also like a committee that's more representative. It seemed ironic that we have a committee for diversity, equity, and inclusivity, and we had 6 times more parents on the committee than we did students. It just seems weird. And so I would propose that we have more students and parents, limiting the students to about 8. So the committee itself would be more wieldy, the maximum of 22 or 20. And representation from administration and school board as well. The work we heard that needs to be done Monday is a lot of work. And I think for this year, having that kind of a focus for the committee, it might change the next year. I think focus needs to be adjustable as well as membership. And so I would say for a year, this might be a great focus point. And the next year, when we're looking for new membership, if we want to change it once a year, be a time to reconsider, is there other focuses that would make sense?
Thank you, Mark. Judy?
Yeah, I really appreciated all the work that the committee put into that, and the findings were something that we can deal with, and I think we should deal with it. And I think we've got avenues for looking at the various points that were made administratively, and maybe policy and curriculum, all of those things. So I think we have enough information from the committee in their report to start working at those. So I first was thinking we don't need the DEI committee, but listening to Mark, I agree. I think it should be much more student-centered, and a lot of changes made. I don't see it as a standing committee. I see it as maybe, like Mark is saying, getting more kids involved and finding out how we can solve the problems from the students' point of view. But I'm a little skeptical about keeping this committee going with such a broad charge or lack of charge. Maybe that's my concern. So I'm still open, but I think we've got a lot on our plate with what they've given us already. And so I'd like to figure out a way to implement some of the ideas that were brought up, and especially some of the things that the students were saying. So I'm really open, but I'm guarded.
Thank you, Judy. Kind of going last, my thoughts on the committee. First of all, I feel our committee is made up of some very committed, passionate individuals who see a real need and have focused on the experiences of kids. And I really appreciate the avenue that they wiggled into. My concern with the committee, as shared by many of the board members, is I feel it kind of is circling too far away from us. I love Ted's idea, maybe it should be a community committee, and let them come to the board as they see things that are affecting our work here. And when they see community needs, they go to see, Todd Schmidt or somebody on the village board. I just feel it's sometimes out of our orbit in where they were doing their work. I feel we need this work done. I think we all heard at the in community engagement, there are kids who need adults to advocate for safe space for them. They need adults to respond appropriately, and maybe our adults need some guidance and some staff development and some support so they can step forward and make those comments as needed. I think our committee needs to be charged by administration. We have a lot of staff members. Our WTA has made a goal this year around diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have staff members that they're motivated, they want to get involved. So I would love to see it come back to more of a school-homed committee, and not so many volunteers, and how that actually looks. So many of the things I heard come out of the report are really not board actionable things. They're practices and processes, and they're more administrative. There may be policies and there may be guidance from board, but I have to agree with many people who said, we need those student voices, we need those parent voices, we need our staff who sees things. We need to know what tools they need to help our kids, to make that more inclusive community. So I think I would like to maybe advocate that we start with kind of a committee, maybe 3 board members. My reason about not just throwing it to the goals committee, which isn't meeting much, is I'd like people to join this committee as a passion they have or a desire they have. Just like when we put committees together, our board committees, you always get asked what you want to be on, and we don't just throw you there. So to charge it to a committee that's already formed that may not be the makeup of the people that want to be there, I don't know if I'm interested in that. But maybe we want to start with, you know, I don't want to just throw it on Randy's plate. I know Tim has been very involved, and I don't know if it could be kind of co-chaired again. I don't want to pick an administrator, but maybe you can seek out administrative support. And maybe the board members could indicate if they would like to be on this committee, and maybe we start with administrative and board meeting, like 3 board members, as we have on all our committees, some administrators, and then we look at how to get the other representatives. Do we, you know, go through an application form like you did last time, make that known in the public? Jack, comment?
Yeah, I guess one of the things, we don't know what we don't know, right?
Yeah.
And I think what I heard at that meeting last Monday night is we got to keep the communications going. It's not necessarily a committee, but it's how do we keep the communications going? I think if you have several sessions of that, you know, because people are going to kind of come and go, you know, and it's not a commitment, but if you want to exchange your ideas, you know, that forum is going to give you an avenue to collect ideas. And then what you can do is kind of pull those thoughts together, and then you can set up the committee. I think you've already got a report from the DEI committee. Let's take a look at that report and say, okay, how can we divvy it up? You know, so it's a two-pronged approach. So how do we divvy it up to put the work in curriculum or into facilities, or, you know, where does it belong? You know, so that at least those committees can take a look at it. And then with these community engagements that we do over time, collect data, which is going to give you the basis for how do we go forward.
Well, I think that's what we've done. I think right now, we're at the action stage. I mean, I think we've done the collection of stuff, but we need a group that's not just gonna be floating and talking about issues. We need to say, here's the issue we want to attack. You know, my first thought is sort of the reporting instrument that Joel and Tim and the group have been working on. I don't want that to die. So I thought that maybe that's the first day, you know, let's define this, let's sharpen this tool, you know, and that's the only thing we focus on at this point. You know, and what I didn't like about what I've been hearing was it got off on finger pointing, complaining, some stuff like that, some, you know, disgust with how things are moving. That's where I thought as a board member, we are stepping in and saying, we're getting off tangent, we need to stay on this, this is what we need to focus on, and stuff like that. I don't want it to be open up to how I'm feeling that night or what's going on in my head. We need action items now, and we need to move forward. So I think opening it up to more community discussion, which is great, and we can continue those, but I think it just, where does that go? It's got to go someplace. And I feel that if somebody here doesn't take control of it, then it's just going to keep spinning.
I think we need to control it.
And that's I think the concern of everyone out there too, is we lost control. And I sort of feel like we did.
I really like Joan's suggestion. If we're going to go in that direction, I'd like to throw my interest into the hat. Maybe it should be just a group made up of board members, not from committee members, but just a separate focus, short-term group to set this thing up and get it moving in a way that the whole board can accept and we feel would be beneficial to the community and the school.
I like that idea that we have a small group that will synthesize this and come up with some suggestions instead of having the whole board discuss possibilities. But like Mark is saying, if you have an interest and want to work towards that, and I think we need an action, we need movement, not just more research.
So why don't people just email me if you're interested in being part of the group. And then Randy and I, and maybe you can think of an administrative kind of head to it. And
Yeah, and I think that one of the biggest complaints too is we want differences of thought around this, because we do have that on this, around this table. You're in?
Jackson?
Well, Jackson, we filled it. No.
I'm in.
So, then I think, yeah.
Well, we definitely do.
We definitely, that's what we're gonna be successful. If we don't, we won't, so. Good.
well, thank you all for sharing, and I again want to thank the committee for all that they've done, because it's beginning us down that road, and like Jack said, you don't know until you know, and I think we learned a lot through what they have discovered and what we heard last Monday, and I think it's time to go down that road and do some
But
action.
one of the things I don't want to, forget is we told the committee, or the community, that we're going to have a few follow-ups,
Yes,
kind of a.
I agree.
Kind of a sit around the table.
Round table.
And it's got to be a structured conversation, so that we get out of it what we need to make decisions going forward,
And maybe that's something this committee that
That's
we
what we
put
can,
together, we
potentially
can
talk about.
start talking about that too.
Can I clarify what you're saying? So what you're saying, Joan, is you want board members to contact you if they're interested in serving in that capacity?
Yes.
And then,
You're gonna find
I'll
administrative.
find administration, and the current DEI committee that has been operating is
Done.
done.
They can reapply, but
They
I would
can
like to.
reapply, but I actually, I don't know, well, Gina's here. Maybe that does need to be more of a community committee.
I think what we've got to do is kind of have our meeting, discuss it, and then we can start putting some meat around the bones.
Yeah. But our current DEI committee.
Is dead, or
Yeah.
is.
It's on pause.
On pause until we.
So.
I'll wait to hear from you on kind of who those members are, because I
Yes.
think what that meeting would look like is probably to take a look at where we're at.
Yes.
To be something that we could bring back to the board.
In
Is that what I'm understanding?
Okay,
Yes.
that's what I was gonna ask. Can we get that done before November? So we
Yes.
can present to everyone
Yes.
what it looks like?
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, and that will include community or the committee membership. So I think we're moving on to facility committee.
So Facilities Committee met on October 4th. Basically, we had an update on the energy efficiency projects and the capital projects that were going on, and the Bethel Circle planning, and an update that the portable classrooms were up and running, the additional portable classrooms. An update on custodial staffing, that we have had 4 new hires, but we're still short on custodial staff. And then a discussion on the Village of Waunakee draft ordinance, which you saw in your packet. But I don't believe there's any actionable items.
For facilities?
The only-
about
The automatic.
We have the
Oh, the automatic
automatic,
entry.
the
I'm
automatic
sorry.
door is our action item.
So, you need to talk about it?
Yeah. You
So I'll
want
make a
This-
motion
yeah.
to approve it.
Yeah, this is intermediate school. They have some students as they enter the area in the back of the school to the playground. And ADA accessible automatic door would be beneficial to their services. So that's what we're advocating for.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Did you get that? Ted had a second. Did you guys hear the motion for the automatic door?
I believe it was a vote for it or a motion for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes. So
Okay.
all in favor of that motion, say aye.
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 Opposed?
And as I look at the Vogel people in the room, I would just say that on our next referendum, the concept of having a school building without an ADA door to the playground should not be overlooked this time.
The budget is going to go later, so that is all of that.
I actually, Steve, is the HR piece tied to the budget piece? Yes. So can I just move budget and HR?
Sure,
That would be-
so
so-
we have the curriculum committee,
Yep.
right?
Yep, let me kind of take that one if that's all right.
Sure.
Curriculum committee met I guess we met a couple months ago. Part of what we were doing was a follow-up on an RFP that we put forth for a partnership for mental health services within the school. This is really a partnership with a third-party provider where we would provide space within our school district for a clinic to operate and to provide services to our students. This is something that other districts have done over time. We've seen it and watched it be successful. The board approved us going to RFP with this last spring. That process moved forward. We did bring in for interviews the Psychotherapy Center of Waunakee. They came into the curriculum committee where we did an interview with them. The committee had an opportunity to interact with the leaders of that group. Administration then followed up with a separate meeting with them to vet out a few questions that we had with regards to logistics and a few other items that we felt were of pertinence. After we conducted that we felt very comfortable making the recommendation tonight. You see an MOU within your packet tonight that we're asking for your approval of. That MOU is for 1 year and will allow us to move forward with working with the Psychotherapy Center of Waunakee to provide an on-site services to students, that some of them of whom they already serve, but also a referral process that we can work with parents if they do seek out and need mental health services for their children, that we have a place where they can readily access that in a timely manner without having to miss school. One of the challenges that we've found over time is that when a family or a student needs services, it's often a multiple month wait to get to those services. So part of our investigation into this and why we're advocating for it is we feel we can cut down that and be able to have services readily available within a timely manner. So our recommendation from administration and from the curriculum committee is to approve the MOU for 1 year for the Psychotherapy Center of Waunakee.
Randy, can you clarify, where will they be meeting with the students?
Chris, I'm going to ask you for a second because that was one of the pieces is this. Chris Mand, who's been working very closely with kind of the logistics of this.
Give Kim the wording. Do you want me to get the two?
So Chris, can you just talk about a few logistical pieces as far as like where they would meet and how that specifically would work? And I know you've talked to them about the referral process. I think those are a couple of really important pieces logistically so the board can understand how that operates.
Sure. We have a private space, and I'm not even sure what hallway it is, but it's towards the end of the hallway that was utilized by our special ed staff, and now we're kind of
At the high
transitioning
school.
that. A private office space toward the end of the building where we have our Catholic Charities partner who's doing some outreach, and then Waunakee Psychotherapy Center Waunakee would also use that space, and it's very private. We have worked with our student services about what the referral process would look like. And of course, we as Student Services Department want to work with families and students who have mental health needs first, and then have this as an option for families who would like to seek out mental health therapy in school. So we've talked about the logistics of the counselor making that connection with the student, making sure there's a warm handoff to the therapist so that they know how this is going to work. And these are for new student patients. Of course, Psychotherapy Center has clients they've already been seeing who would be very comfortable and know them. But that warm handoff is really important. And then also having that connection with student services, and our counselors really are taking the lead on this to help transition back to class if it is a more intense therapy session or something that needs a little bit of a touch point after as well. So our referral process would be if we have a kid we feel would benefit and there's barriers for families to get their child to therapy, whether it's can't take off a half a day to drive into Madison to get their kid to an appointment, or it's just more convenient for families to have that service at school, we'll work with the family to identify goals. We'll work with the student to identify goals. We'll make that connection with the therapist.
So is this for?
I'd like to make a motion that we move this
We're
proposal
still
forward.
We're still
Mark,
talking about it.
Mark, Jack had a comment first.
Is this for K-12,
No, this is specifically for our high school, right now,
specifically for high school?
as our one-year trial.
And is this provider already have office space in Waunakee?
Yes. They
And
are.
they can't expand their office space there?
I think it's more of a convenience for kids and families if they're on site.
I think part of what we've been trying to do, Jack, is trying to have it so that transportation and traveling somewhere is not a barrier, so that we can actually work through within space within our school to help service that. I mean, part of the agreement is certainly this is not they're going to operate with all the records, et cetera, are theirs. The referral pieces are theirs. We're simply giving them access to our space and access to the students that with parent, parents have to be in, this isn't something we're just pulling kids in. Parents have to be part of that referral process and be part of moving forward. It also allows us for them to address, they certainly, if you have insurance, that they will be utilizing those pieces, but it's also a piece that if there's kids without insurance or without financial means to it, that's not a barrier. And that's also not a cost to us. That's a piece that they're willing to assume within the partnership moving forward.
The referral form itself actually has a signed parent consent part
Right.
to it. And a release of information would also be part of that referral, so that we have that release of information to work in a collaborative effort and wrap around that child.
And we have this space available.
Yes.
Thank you, Chris.
The challenge that I have is that it starts here. And what I've seen in the past, it becomes scope creep.
It becomes what?
Scope creep. And the scope of what we approve here tonight may not be what it looks like 5 years from now. And this is going to be part of your budget 5 years from now.
And I guess that's part of the things that we did put forth. And I understand that concern, Jack. I mean, the one thing that I think we have found over time is that as schools, we are looking at having to be in places we weren't before. I mean, right now, being in the mental health services area where we are bringing in a third-party provider is not something that many years ago we had thoughts of. But what we have is more kids with stress, anxiety, depression is rising. And we're seeing kids who need those, who don't have access to them. And this goes back a few years, but when we met with our medical providers, that's a piece that is not easily accessible by families. So as we've spoken to some of our medical providers in the area, SSMD and the UW system, we do not have mental health services at our Waunakee clinic here in town. It's not accessible. You have to go into Madison, and then there's a wait period. So for us, and for where schools are, is seeing that need, seeing that we need to have those partnerships, bringing it in is the option that we are at, and I think it provides the services we need for some of our students. And that's kind of where we're landed. I totally understand the scope creep piece. That's a piece we've talked about. I think we talked about it even at the curriculum committee. But it was also part of our RFP putting forth that if you were going to be bidding into this, that this was going to be a piece that it was not going to be budgetarily an impact to us. We also put the MOU together for a year in order to try this model so we can come back. So we'll have to come back here in a year and bring that back to
They
you.
are providing us with a program summary and some data that we've talked about how to analyze if this partnership is effective, and we really stress that this would be a one-year trial, and then we would revisit and see what they provide us as far as that evaluation summary on how they service kids, any data that shows how kids are functioning after services and before, so we were clear about that.
Yeah, I think, the board will have to keep it in check in the future, but, I agree with the student that was here earlier, how she missed a day or two and she's so far behind. My kids have done that as well. There's not a great process if you're out of school. And so this gives an opportunity to reduce the time out of school as well. And, you know, for parents who don't work at home or that are out working, this gives them some treatment to where they don't have to take off work to come in, pick up their son or daughter, take them to the therapy or and bring them back. And so I think it's a good idea. We just, you know, keep an eye on it in the future.
I will add that they do take most insurances, and like Randy had mentioned, any students who are uninsured or underinsured, they agreed in the MOU to cover that. So there's no cost to the district.
Right.
Thank you. So.
All right, Mark.
All right, Mark, we're ready.
I already made the motion.
So we need a second to his motion?
Second.
No, second.
Dave, second. Any other discussion or concerns? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Yeah.
Get that, Rebecca? Thank you. Okay, down to administrative reports. The facility referendum planning update, our next steps.
All right, very good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually move over here by Ted, so I'm not speaking at your back. If you want to hit present at the top, Rebecca, on the over to the right by the share. Thank you. All right, thank you. Tonight what I want to do is just take a few minutes to kind of walk through some of the work that we've been doing, kind of set as a beginning point for really our launch into more specific planning for the potential of a fall 2022 referendum. Now, particularly looking and built around our facility needs. Can you collect Rebecca? It's not listening to me here. Thank you. We're going to do a few quick introductions, talk about our facility planning needs, and then also a few next steps, a Q&A. And in the presentation that you have, there's also an appendices that has a number of the diagrams that you've seen over time. I don't know why this isn't working. Can you click, please? I want to take just a moment to introduce our team. I'll let them introduce themselves so that you can see a few of our members of the folks we've been working with. This is a group that the board pulled together pre-COVID. We started some of our work around the planning for our facilities and our partners with EUA and Vogel. So Andy, can I just start you with a quick introduction so that the board knows who you guys are?
Yeah, absolutely. Andy Lyons with Epstein Ewan Architects. I'm the engagement specialist on the job. My job is to ensure that community stakeholders, staff stakeholders, and all of you, of course, have a voice in the planning process.
Hi, Chris Michaud with Epstein Ewan Architects, Senior Design Architect and Educational Planner. Been working with the district here for a number of years on the design and planning side, helping you guys with the master plan, and continuing along with this effort as well.
Jay Thompson, Vogel Brothers Building Company, role as project executive, heavily involved up front here on the budgeting and scheduling and constructability and working alongside the entire team all the way.
And I know Eric, you're here as well, Eric Balwick in the back. All right, all right. This is a little bit of a history. When we go back to 2010, that was when we started our addition to the high school. This was the second level of the high school. It was actually something that was foreshadowed to the community in a long-range plan that they had when we started doing the construction of, if you go back to the construction of Arboretum School, and we added on and some renovations to the high school. There was a point with growth that we would add on to the high school, and we would add a second floor. So that was completed in 2010. At that point, we also had an elementary school referendum that did not pass. And part of when we vetted that out with the community as far as what was occurring, as far as why there wasn't support with moving that part of the project forward, it really was hinged on wanting to see a long-range master plan for the district. And so from that, from 2010 to 2013, we took a very concerted effort to look at our growth, to look at all of our options. Those were the conversations that we had around grade configuration, size of schools that we had a value in within our community, and really talking about what do we want our school district to look like. Do you want to have one middle school or two? Do you want your grade configuration to be K-5? And do you want to keep your intermediate school? How do you want to construct as far as where our students go to school and what age levels of students do they interact with? From that master plan really came forth with the work that led up to the referendum to build the intermediate school. We stayed with our current grade configuration of K4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12. At that point, we were looking at elementary schools that were a little larger in size, like 6 tracks, 6 classes per grade level, and also at this point looking at wanting to maintain 1 intermediate school and 1 middle school feeding into 1 high school. The intermediate school and the heritage renovations plus additional work as far as maintenance around our district was completed in 2014. By 2016, we moved the portable classroom unit from Heritage over to the middle school. And in 2019, we started the master planning for phase 2. Because what we had laid out in that initial master plan in 2013 was that the intermediate school would be the first phase of that work, followed then by a tracking of our student enrollment to then look at elementary and middle school, with the idea being at one point that when our high school needs became available, that we would have the current middle school becoming part of the high school campus. So the piece is the high school going to be kind of the influencer to make that move, or is it the result of our middle school hitting its capacities, and then also looking at our needs at the elementary level. We had to obviously pause some of that work in 2020 as the pandemic moved forward. The board put a pause on that work and has reinstituted that work last spring. Going into this school year, as a result of some larger bubble classes moving through the middle school, we did include and add to board support an additional trailer behind the middle school. So we have 4 classrooms that are in portable classroom units behind the middle school. And that really leads us up into our work here today. There's really 3 things that we're talking about. We're talking about tracking our enrollment growth, modernizing our learning environments, and capital maintenance. So I want to take just a moment to really talk about those 3 things. From a growth perspective, I mean, Steve has the third Friday count is obviously a really big part of what we are seeing from a growth perspective. We have north of 80 kids that we gained this school year over what we had projected from last year. That growth is occurring across our grade levels. We're also seeing some growth happening in areas that we haven't seen traditionally. We have a kindergarten class right now of 299 students. That's larger than what we've had for kindergarten numbers in recent years. Usually they're tracking around 270. We've already talked about the portable units. And some of the things that we see is that we still remain to be a community that people are moving to. We see that with the growth into our subdivisions. The diagram there is just of the Viridian development, just to give you an idea of one of the developments that's taking place. And part of our work is to continue to monitor our enrollment, and we're continuing to work with Mark Roffers, who will provide a report to the board in December. As we look at our modern learning environments, that's the other piece to this. So monitoring growth, and then secondarily, taking a look at how do we now, as we move forward with meeting the needs of our students, what kind of spaces do we teach in? We don't teach in the same configurations and in the same ways that we did many years ago. We have a lot of collaborative spaces, small group instruction, and flexible environments with flexible furniture. Those are things, and this is a picture of kind of the type of work that we have at the intermediate school, and it's the type of work that we want to continue to facilitate throughout our district. we take a look at renovations, modern learning environments, but also looking at what are some of the projects that we talked about. And the board discussed these in late 2019, early 2020, wanting to renovate our welding lab, to bring that up to a standard where we can more proficiently deliver that curriculum for dual credit with our ATC. We want to be looking at things like remodeling our tech ed lab space, all of our metals labs and our woods labs. Over by the pool, looking at a family changing area. Right now, we do not have an area if you have a young child or if you have a child with a disability to have appropriate or a comfortable changing area. Large group instruction space is a thing that a training space is something that we have a lack of within our district, so looking to create more of those. And then just looking at what's our future expansion and work that's going to happen with regards to our middle school. So when we look at our learning environments, it's not only modernizing them for how we teach, but also looking at them programmatically to see how we can move forward to make our district stronger. The third prong of this work was on facility maintenance. And back in 2019, Jay, I believe you put those numbers together. We were looking at about $24.8 million. As we kind of started to cost some of those things moving forward, the number that we are utilizing right now as of today is 31.2. And Jay, can I just have you talk a little bit about kind of some of the work that you've done on these pieces and kind of how those numbers are shifting? Because I know that's been a question that the board has had with regards to what's changed over the last 18 to 20 months.
Yeah, so when we look at that list, John and I meet probably every quarter, half year to review that list. And the range here, you see the low end to the high end. Some of that has to do with work being able to happen at the same time. So for instance, if you're going to replace the ceilings and the light fixtures at the same time, you can be more efficient than if you're looking at each of those components individually. We've also updated with stuff that's come off the list over the last couple of years. And then probably the biggest change you'll see is when that list was initially developed, there was stuff that was going to get past its useful life in the next 5 years. Well, that was from 2019, looking now at 2021 and 2022 potential for a referendum. So there's been stuff that's been now pulled onto that list that will hit the end of that useful life. The other thing to note is as the pathways are determined, there would be work in some of the schools that would take work off this maintenance list. So a good example is Heritage. Heritage has between $5 and $6 million of maintenance work. Depending on the solution for Heritage, some of that could come off the maintenance list to make that maintenance bucket smaller.
So this will be an item that as we continue our work forward, we will continue to vet these numbers out, show what those projects are, and as Jay said, depending on some of the work that occurs at our schools, will influence the scope and the level of scope that is needed for each of those projects. All right. When we put together our principles, our guiding principles, when we put together the intermediate school, these were the guiding principles that we used. I think we shared these with the board back in late 2019, early 2020. But again, it's focused on enrollment growth, long-range approach, looking at long-range planning so we can predict where we are going and what we are looking to accomplish over time. Future-ready learning environments, those modern learning environments we've discussed. Looking at our facilities across the district to make sure that we have students who are able to access like-type facilities across our district and making sure we don't create discrepancies. Maintaining our capital maintenance needs, and then delivering and being responsible to our taxpayers and our community values. So those are some of the principles that we had in 2014 and ones that we affirmed in 2019 again. From a timeline standpoint, I'm going to start way down here in the right-hand corner. That's the referendum date for November 2022. In order to hit that date, we have a number of things that need to occur. And as you can see off to the left-hand side, this is kind of a checklist of those types of things that need to happen. We start to backwards date our pieces. We have to have a resolution by the end of August. That means our work as far as what we define, what's going to actually go on the ballot, has to be in its final format by August 30th so that we can meet the needs of the November ballot and meet those timelines. Our anticipation is that we will have it to the board before that, and the board will complete its work before August 30th, because I think we want to then follow up and make sure we have as much time as possible for communication and outreach with their community. But between now and next summer, we have a number of things that we have to continue to move forward with. And you can see some of these items are board workshops, also community information sessions. Right now, we have quite a few things happening in the district. We have some, obviously, the annual meeting and some of the work that's going on with completing the budget process for this year. So October is always a busy timeline for us. So as we hit November, early December, we're going to be touching on these first items here, making sure we touch on our goals, which is what we're doing tonight, looking at our budget development, which will be a continued process starting from this point forward, and a piece that Steve's already been working with our financial advisors on. A board workshop where we can further understand exactly what some of our options are at hand, and then community information sessions. We're hoping then to be leading that up into a survey that we can give to the entire community after we vet some things out this fall, so that in the spring we can get further feedback from our entire community that will then be informative as you adopt our resolutions moving into the summer. So you can see we've been looking at how do we backwards map this from November 8th. So there's quite a bit of work that will happen, not only from a board, administrative, and staff perspective, but also a community engagement piece as well. This just kind of gives you kind of the timelines as far as some of the things that are coming up here. We have our enrollment projections. We'll be bringing those forward to you in December, and then just trying to move all of our aspects forward as far as what these actually look like. The reason we have annual meeting pieces on there is because as we move into, we have to make some decisions at the annual meeting as far as what tax rates look like prior to the referendum in November. So this will be similarly to if a referendum passes, your levy would look like X. If it doesn't pass, it looks like Y. So many of these are just some milestone dates that we will be continuing to bring back to the board as far as what we're trying to accomplish. Talked about stakeholders. That's a really important piece in the work that we're doing. The community survey is something we started that prior to having our pause with the pandemic. We're working with School Perceptions and Bill Foster. We've continued to have those conversations to, particularly as we vet out what our options are going to be and what are some of the test questions that we want to receive some feedback from the community on. Those will also be influenced by community meetings, and then working with Annie Blackburn, just making sure that we are reaching out to all of our stakeholder groups. Key communicators are folks who are kind of leaders within our community who can help disseminate information out to other groups. And then obviously looking at how we communicate with our public through traditional and social media means. So this is going to be a big piece of our work moving forward as well. So what's next? We have to make sure that our staff and community are informed. We have to ensure that we have and analyze our enrollment projections so that you can understand some of the why as far as what we are doing. And then refining our facility options and costs. And as we look at our key questions, this is, I think, the piece of why, Jack asked for this kind of to be moved before the budgetary pieces. And I think it's really built off of those first two bullet points. Because one of the decisions that we have to make is, the first one is talking about Heritage Elementary. Do we renovate or expand it, or do we construct a new Heritage? And that's one pathway that we have to vet out with regards to our elementary space needs. But the second item is then related to our new middle school construction and building a new middle school and starting that transition of our current middle school becoming part of our high school. And part of the discussion that we need to receive community input on is we know those are part of our long-range plan. Those pieces haven't changed. They haven't changed since we built the intermediate school back in 2014. They haven't changed since the 2019-20 timeframe. And as we've started to review our options, they're still true here today. But what we have to determine is how are we going to package those together to bring to the community for consideration. And one option is to take them separately. So for example, bullet point 1 at one referendum, bullet point 2 at a second. Another option is to package them together in a larger effort to then parcel those pieces together so you only go to the voters once. And that's a conversation that we have to have as a board and also get some guidance from the community as far as what's going to be the best approach for us. That'll be played into some of the financials that Steve will work with PMA on as well. We then have to look at some of the things that Jay has worked on with regards to the appropriate level of capital maintenance. We do have a capital maintenance long-term plan. It has a 20-year plan that we continue to update, and we need to look at what's our initial investment that we want to put forth in order to meet our immediate needs. I think the numbers that you were just seeing were really built off of us looking at from current year to year 5. So we kind of picked a point in time of where we felt that would get us to address the most immediate needs in front of us. And then the last part there is looking at what other parts of our district do we want to look at for renovation. Those are the list of things from the welding lab to the changing area at the pool to renovated spaces, TLC, district office, some other items that we've had discussions with and we vetted out in a previous meeting. So those are the key questions that I think need to start to come forward and of where we'll be structuring some of our work and community engagement around. I'll open it up for questions in a second, but there is a board appendices to this presentation, and it just goes through what all those different options are. I'm not going to spend time on those tonight because those are items the board has seen, and as we continue to move forward, we'll continue to bring those items forward as the areas that we're actually vetting out. Tonight was really meant to give you a foretaste of kind of what's coming forward, what our work is going to look like over the next number of months, and to backwards map it from November of 2022. So with that, I'd open it up for questions for us administratively or any members of our EOA or Vogel team. Is there anything to add that I missed, guys? Got a thumbs up from Andy, that's good. Any questions?
Usually I have to talk a little bit. I didn't get to say anything.
There you go. Any questions from board members? Judy or Mark, anything that you have?
No, it's pretty clear. You kind of covered it well.
No questions.
We've seen it for a year and a half.
Yeah, you've seen it for a year and a half, absolutely. And that was-
How's your availability of products? Is that tough?
It's a great question, Joan. Availability of products, and just like every industry seeing it is really tough. The advantage you do have here is a November 22 referendum, construction likely not starting until 6 to 9 months after that. So we do have the ability to plan some of those longer lead items that are critical and be able to get in the queue in the appropriate timing.
Do you feel a build-out time is longer because of some of those issues of people and parts?
Right now, it's definitely an impact. Seems like every day we're hearing from vendors that we'll get a ship date and a week before we'll hear, oh, switchgear's not showing up or this isn't showing up. And so there is a backlog right now. I'm hoping within the next couple of years we work through that a little better.
Yeah, where'd all those people and things go?
Apparently they're here. Just need truck drivers to deliver them.
Okay.
No other questions?
Any questions? All right.
Thank you,
Thank you guys for being here.
So at this point, we're going to go back to the budget.
Yep. Now we'll go back to the budget committee because this was.
And after that, we're going to do the HR because that kind of has to follow budget.
Correct.
And then we'll jump over to Andy.
All right.
So budget committee.
So a couple of things we talked about, and I think one of the reasons that I wanted to do the referendum before we talk about the budget is we're talking about debt service defeasance, which we've done in the past. We took that money and put it towards the referendum to upgrade for COVID expenses. But I think one of the things that we're telling the community is that the reason that one of the main reasons that we're doing this is we want to keep the mill rate where the taxes relatively consistent, so that we can do some planning and we have an idea of what's going on. You know, as we start these discussions on the referendum, if, you know, from a strategy standpoint, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, if we potentially break these out into smaller chunks and, you know, do like the heritage, and then a couple years later, follow it up with, you know, the middle school, you know, what that does is it allows the debt service defeasance to do exactly what we're trying to do. So as we, you know, go forward in our discussions about referendum, we should probably think about that. And Steve, I'll let you chime in.
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate that. So under the Budget Committee report this evening, there's several agenda items that the Budget Committee has moved forward for requested action this evening. And then there's the first topic that Jack just referenced, which is the debt service defeasance, which was a discussion item looking to confirm the board goal on this topic. But I'm actually going to just jump back just a bit to talk about the budget planning process. Just as a reminder, the budget planning process completes itself during the month of October. Next Monday night is the annual meeting, which is scheduled to take place at this building at 7 o'clock, followed by later on tonight, we're going to ask the school board to approve a special meeting to approve the budget and tax levy the Monday after. The annual meeting information has been published in the Waunakee Tribune. It's a 2-week posting requirement. I was going to ask Rebecca just for the members of the public to show where all of this information is for anyone who's interested in seeing it. So Rebecca's just going to show that under the district page, under business services, we have an annual meeting tab, and all of the information for the 2021 annual meeting is available for the public as of right now. So on this website, you will see a draft version of the PowerPoint presentation that we will share that evening, as well as seeing the information that was published for the Tribune, all available for the public to view at this time. So if anyone asks any questions about the annual meeting, you certainly can share the information that's included on our website or reference them to Randy and I, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that any members of the public have about the annual meeting. Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind hopping back. Go ahead, Randy.
I guess one of the pieces I just want to point to on that sheet was the powers of the annual meeting. The annual meeting is actually something that is set up by statute with certain powers that allow for the general public to vote on specific items. But it does not mean that there's any item can just be put on the annual meeting. So there's certain powers of the annual meeting that are articulated on the site that Steve referenced.
All right. Rebecca, if you could jump back to the first topic, which was a discussion item at the committee meeting, which was the topic of debt service defeasance. What I wanted to do with the budget committee was to have a discussion around this topic to really confirm what the school board goals were related to property taxes and a consistent tax rate across fiscal years, which is what Jack was referencing. In recent years, the school board has stated a financial goal of tax rate consistency. So that really started a couple years ago when the budget committee of the board brought forward a recommendation to the full board to pay down debt that the district had early to save taxpayer funds on interest costs while maintaining a consistent tax rate from what existed the year prior. We've looked at that strategy over the last couple of years, and what I wanted to have a discussion about with the budget committee is whether or not I should be bringing back a budget 2 weeks from tonight that adopt that philosophy of bringing forward a property tax levy and equalized tax rate that is consistent across years. As we talked about at the committee meeting, it's an important topic to plan across fiscal years as well, and to make sure that as all board members are aware of this topic, and that this goal is one that the board is seeking for administration to continue moving forward with. So Jack, thanks for introducing this topic. You do see some attachments that I'm not intending to go through unless there's questions, but at the budget committee meeting, we did have a presentation. You can watch it on Zoom. The meeting was recorded. I'd be happy to answer any questions any board members have on this topic tonight, or you're certainly welcome to view the materials at any time and reach out to me. But we thought it was important for the committee to bring this forward so that any board members could have any questions that they might have on this topic answered, or any feedback that you want to share as we're looking over the next couple weeks to finalize the budget process for this year. Okay, if not, we can move on to the action items. Tiffany, would you mind joining up here? Thank you. Tiffany joined us at the meeting, and we talked about a couple of financial topics related to special education. The first one is regarding the topic of a van purchase, and Tiffany, if you wouldn't mind sharing some information with the board on this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. As you already know, we have a driver shortage with our bus company, so we have several kids that we're unable to transport to school right now and to get them there on time. So their parents have been transporting. We've been paying the families to transport, which is part of the agreement when they have an IEP and they have specialized transportation written into their IEP. But all of the families are eager to have the district provide that transportation as soon as possible. So we looked at the option of buying wheelchair accessible vans that would not only be used to bring kids to and from school, but would also allow us to do other trips. For example, the middle school special ed group goes to Piggly Wiggly every week, the daily living skills class. They do shopping. Right now we're having Van Go help us with that, and it averages about $60 a week for one trip to Piggly Wiggly. So a lot of different areas. Same with our transition program. We can also use our vans for transportation for kids going to jobs or community outings as well. So in the long run, it could actually save us money, and I know that Steve's going to talk a little bit about that piece too, but we also got special permission excuse me, from DPI to get categorical aid on our purchase, so we'll get approximately 30% back on the purchase. It requires pre-approval from DPI because it's a larger sum and it's not necessarily always available for categorical aid. So we've done that already, and we've also looked at we looked at both new vehicles and used, but the used vehicle market is pretty inflated right now. And I think there's about $7,000 difference between new and used, so it really made more sense to go with new vehicles at this time instead of used vehicles. And I don't know if you want to explain just the savings over time, you probably have a better
Sure.
overall.
Thanks, Tiffany.
Yeah.
I just listed a couple of the advantages of taking this approach. The first one is there is pretty significant cost savings. A route through Lamers costs about $50,000 per year. The cost of the vehicle is roughly around there, as well as a minimal increment for the driver cost. Well within 2 years, the cost of the district owning our own vehicle will be paid back, and the vehicle will last at least 5 years, if not longer. So there is significant cost savings. Tiffany mentioned earlier driver availability. You don't have to have a CDL license to drive one of these vehicles for the district. And then really the third piece is it's an improved service for students and families as well. The families that we've been working with have been great. They've been willing to provide the transportation so far this year. They know that we have a shortage of CDL licensed bus drivers. They are asking, though, for us to take over this responsibility as soon as we can. The Budget Committee did take a look at this topic and is recommending approval of the van purchase on a 3-0 vote. Did any Budget Committee members have any comments you'd like to make?
I think this is a good purchase, good utilization of funds. We get some reimbursements from special ed funds, so.
I just appreciate you researching and doing the work that you did to get that special ed grant, and yeah, seems like a good plan. So if you're ready, I would take a motion for that purchase.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any other discussion or questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. Then we have some special ed para educator requests. Tiffany, are you going to do that for us?
Yep, I'm sure you're really surprised to see this again, but we, you have the general information from me in the budget request for this. And it really, it's not one that we can capture transfer of service on. It'd be at Prairie Elementary School, just a student that's having significantly more needs in kindergarten than was having previously. So we're having to increase the staffing level with that individual student. And then,
If I can add to that, we also had a student that, I mean, the initial write-up here was for a 1.0 FTE. I'm actually going to ask for 2.0. The reason being is not only the student that we're asking for this for, but also we had another student that registered with us late last week after board book was released. We reviewed their IEP, and they have some significant needs that we are not able to support with our current staffing. So this is a place right now where we're shifting some people around temporarily to cover it, but I would request that this go from 1 FTE to 2, one of them being at Prairie and the second being at Arboretum.
Yep, absolutely.
And Randy, if I could jump in, one of the things that we talked about with the committee is information you'll see on the screen that Tiffany filed transfer service requests with the DPI for eligible special ed students who moved into our community this year. And those requests totaled $311,000. $220,000 of that, we are going to be eligible to increase our budget in 2 weeks as a result of us doing that. I know that when Tiffany presented requests to you since she started with us, she referenced transfer of service as a funding mechanism. The window has closed now for transfer of service for this year, but any students that move into our community that need additional services in their IEP, Tiffany's already starting to track that for next year. So there's very specific windows, but we're maximizing that funding source this year, and we're already starting to plan for next year as well.
Because the Arboretum, the addition of the Arboretum position would be covered under transfer of service. The Prairie position is not, yep.
And the other topic we reviewed with the budget committee was a confirmation about funding all of those positions using local dollars, because then the state of Wisconsin provides state categorical aid back to the district. One option with special education positions is always to look at federal funds as well. We try to minimize that because if you use federal funds, you're not eligible for state special ed categorical aid reimbursement. So the committee was recommending seeking maximizing state special ed categorical aid funds for the positions that we've added, as well as moving forward with the position that we discussed at the committee meeting.
Thank you, Steve. And so I would take a motion for the 2 positions that we need right now.
Make the motion to approve 2 positions as presented.
Second.
Any other questions for either Steve or Tiffany? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? So no.
Thanks,
Thank
Tiffany.
you.
Thank you.
So request for an additional EL para.
Yep. This is an item that we did not vote on at the budget committee. It was a piece that Chris was working with our staff on. For our EL, our English learner students, we've reported to the board that we've had an increase in our enrollment and needs in the EL area this school year, significant growth. One of the things that we have to do in the fall of the year when we have students in is we have to go through an assessment. And what we are assessing is their level of English proficiency. We have a number of our students, a significant number of our students, who are scoring at the 1 and 2 level. That means they have limited or no English skills. So as we've been looking at our needs across the district, we've obviously added some staff based on numbers. Now, as we're looking at the significant needs, we're asking for an additional EL paraeducator to assist with kind of our broader needs across the district. Our needs are up at all of our schools, but particularly this is focused at the elementary level, so we can put some targeted assistance to the kids that need it most, and to our staff who are working with these children. Anything to add, Chris?
Motion to bring the person on board, provide them.
I second.
Any other questions or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. And final for the budget is the request for new banking.
So local school board policy does require the district to go out every 5 years seeking proposals from community banks for our local banking services. While I was out, Diane Pertzborn led the effort of putting the request for proposal process together and distributing it to all banks who were interested. She reached out to all of the banks in the community to solicit their interest and managed the beginning portion of this process. What I presented to the budget committee were the proposals that we did receive. It was a very competitive process. It was a great process for the district to have gone through because in the end, we're going to actually see cost savings from going through that process. I did put in the notes that we spend approximately $6,000 per year on banking services. The proposals that we received, 3 of them were low cost or no cost services. We also reviewed the interest rates on district resources at the local banking institution. When you combine the no fee proposal and the fact that the one community bank had the highest interest rate that was being included in the proposals, the budget committee is recommending moving forward a motion to this board for consideration of approving the one community bank proposal. That motion was passed by the budget committee on a 3-0 vote. Any committee members have any
Motion to
feedback?
approve the banking relationship.
Second.
Any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
No, I
You made the motion.
I voted against my motion.
You can't say no.
That has to
Already.
be put in the minutes. So I voted against it.
But you would like to, sure.
So I am Steve Piotr. I'm President and Chief Executive Officer of One Community Bank. With me is my colleague Liz Dice. Liz put the information together that Steve was just speaking about. We just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to do business with the school district. The relationship means the world to us, and we appreciate you choosing to partner with us. So with that, thank you.
Thank you.
I love the purple tie already. Very, very well done.
Thank you for noticing. Have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
So I guess the other thing that we did talk about in the budget committee is we talked about building carryovers. And what I'd like to do is charge administration to put together a plan, each building put together a plan on how those are going to be used. Because when we initially passed that, there was, we need to buy a piano or something like that. And I think even recently, we ran into, somebody wanted to buy a piano and they couldn't because there weren't any funds. So I think I'd like to do a 3-year plan on the building carryover. And the other thing I'd like to do that by, I think we were talking about the May timeframe, which gives you plenty of time to do that. The other thing, I'd like an all-district plan on staffing and things like that. And as we get into our next budget period, so that we have a better idea of what our needs are as we go forward. And I think a reasonable time on that, November, January.
Staffing.
Piece is probably right.
Budget's
It's
kind of
probably
an overall budget.
we have to get through some of the registration pieces too. But yeah, we can get the kind of the budget pieces together here, and probably by the January meeting.
January meeting.
Okay, I think we're done with budget.
It seems, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mark.
My concern is we've already got a budget system in place where many of the final goals, budgetary goals, are set in April. I like the idea of targeting a 3-year plan on major projects that they see coming up. But for them to have the entirety plus input from their staff by January, I'm not sure that's reasonable.
No, that part was for May.
I'm sorry?
The budget carryover, Jack suggested May timeline.
No, not the carryover, but just the general plan.
Oh, okay.
Isn't that when we do the, in April, we've done the joint meetings with staff and administration?
Right. I think what Jack was asking for, Mark, was when we take a look at our budget requests, which we have, we filled a number of them this year, but there are still ones that are outstanding, and trying to just get a sense of what are the priorities moving forward and how would we do that over multiple years.
Right.
I think
So
that's
do you think January's doable?
I think it's doable to put the draft together, and then there can be feedback from there. But I think from a standpoint of trying to get at least that out there in front of us early enough in the budget cycle, I think that's doable.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on to HR. We just have one item there.
Ryan, come forward.
It connects to the earlier request about the special education vans, and it identifies a pay scale for employees or employees that could drive those vans. Because it's an interim role, obviously it has additional responsibilities of transporting students safely, but it doesn't require a CDL. So the scale kind of compares to the state and county market.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. And now we're skipping down to the draft communication plan by Annie.
So as Annie's walking forward, this is one of our district goals and board goals for the year, was to put together a district communications plan. I mean, when Annie started here a year ago, this was on our agenda. The last year has been extremely busy as far as the work that she's done, and she's put this piece together as a starting point and kind of a working document for our communication strategies. So I'm going to go over to you, Annie.
Thank you, Randy. Yes, when I was hired, one of the major projects that I was tasked to do was to create a communications plan for our district. Well, we definitely learned a lot over the last 15 months, what we do well, what we struggle with, and what we need to continue to do to move our district forward. So you will see intertwined within the communications plan is 2 major projects that I'm working on or on my radar right now. The first is the visual branding district project. We're in the heart of that right now. We have had 3 focus groups. We have 4 scheduled focus groups with our community in the next couple of weeks for that. And then second kind of major project is the website. So you'll see that is intertwined as well within the communications plan. So we know that that's the next project is the website. It is outdated. We do not reach our stakeholders with our website. It's not mobile friendly, so it means it's not responsive. You try to go to the website on your phone and our stakeholders cannot access that information from our website. So Rick and Randy and I have touched base, I feel like weekly, about our website and when that will happen, but we felt like we needed to get a little bit further along within our district branding process first before we tackle the website. I'd like to highlight just a few areas of the communication plan as examples. So you'll see on page 14 and 15 the goals and strategies. First and foremost, the first example is really taking a look about everything that we share with our families. So clear, concise communication across all school buildings. So for example, K-6 buildings, they produce a newsletter every Thursday. It's a S'mores Thursday email where all of their information that goes to their families comes into the school offices, and an admin assistant creates a beautiful newsletter to share with their families. Well, what we've done is K-6, they do that right now. We're 2 weeks in at the middle school. They started that, so they're on week 2. So really trying to build that consistent communication across all of our school buildings. Next up, the high school. So that will be a big, to try to rein in some of that communications that are being emailed out at all times of the day, all coming from several different individuals. So that's the next task. Second, an example that we've really focused on the last year is working with our district translator and interpreter, Angie Ramos, and really making sure that all of our families have access to all of the information that we are communicating to our families. So we started last year, we live interpret Zoom calls for our families, assemblies. If Randy and I did a video, if we were not able to have Angie on there live with us, we provided closed captioning. So the Spanish translation was then as a closed caption on the videos, so those families could then access that information. And just a couple weeks ago at our first community engagement meeting, Angie was live and we were able to live interpret that community engagement. So we had, I believe, 6 or 7 families that took that information was available to them. So really, this is a draft. I value your input. If you have suggestions, comments, I would love to hear it. This is really a framework, so this is changing every day. So some things we do really well, some things we haven't even touched upon, some we have mastered. So definitely a work in progress.
Great. Thank you.
I feel like 10 o'clock, I get the last item on the agenda, so I feel like I talk quickly, so.
Dave has a question for you, Annie.
I think one of the hardest things in communications is always knowing how well it works, which is why I appreciate page 17.
Yes.
And if you'll go there for a quick second. The only thing is the grammar on the sentence needs just one drop of work, which I think is you meant measures, not measured. But
oh, yes.
Thank you. Down,
I always need your eyes, so.
Yeah, understanding this is a draft.
Yes.
One thing I always look at is how things move on in time. And usually the first person who writes it isn't the person who ends up working with it 10 years from now.
Yeah.
And I hope that as this expands, this is an important area to know how effective you are, is that the actual measures that will be used will be put in here.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I know on social media insight tools, there's easy counting setups that can be done. But I think for that person 10 years down the road, we should link up and put the information in here for how they do it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Where you're getting it from, especially when I look at the community feedback, what measures will they be should be on this page at some point. And I know that's going to take a while to develop.
I think one other piece that I wanted to highlight is, while this is available, I think the next step is the training of our staff to kind of come together, whether that is support in creating their newsletters or, social media, or training on helping creating surveys. So I think that's kind of another piece, kind of umbrella piece with the entire communications plan.
I think.
Ann, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Regarding the evaluation communication plan, is this envisioned to be an annual evaluation? An every other year evaluation? whatever it should be, or is, I would think we'd want to list, with this, the frequency of evaluation.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like it's almost daily, weekly. I haven't considered an official timeline, so I appreciate that question.
I guess what would be the metrics to say that this is effective? Have you thought about those?
I think eventually surveying our stakeholder groups, and are they being able to access and get the information that we're sharing in a concise, clear way and feel supported?
I would just think through that, so that, you got this wonderful plan.
Mm-hmm.
How do we know it works?
I think some of it's going to be through satisfaction, and it's going to be reaching out to those kind of end user groups that we're trying to reach.
Cool.
Yep.
I think one of the things, just real quickly before you kind of end Annie's report, one of the biggest benefits Annie's position has brought to us is a lot of coordination effort. Because as you're part of communications, you're also tied into all the aspects of our work, particularly with the work that's happening down here and the links to our schools.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I value about the work that Annie's doing is she finds those areas where we may have a gap and then lets us know what she's seeing so that we can fill it in process-wise. And I think when we look at all the transportation changes we had last year and how we've kind of orchestrated some of those pieces this year, her coordination and just eye on those things has been invaluable. So I thank you for that and for putting these pieces together.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. Great work.
Thanks.
Third Friday count. Steve.
I had previously sent a memo through email to all the school board members and as well attached the data for your review on the third Friday count. The DPI requires an official count on the third Friday of September. One major takeaway is last September, our district had a decline in enrollment and actually ended up in what the state of Wisconsin calls the declining enrollment exemption on the revenue limit formula. Well, because of the growth of 85 students in 1 year, we climbed out of the declining enrollment exemption and are now considered a positive enrollment district again. So it was a quick entry in declining enrollment and a quick getting out of declining enrollment, which is wonderful for, as you all know, for the school finance system in Wisconsin. So in 2 weeks from tonight, we will be adding this third Friday count data into the information that's presented to you when we bring back the budget for your consideration at the special board meeting. Does anybody have any questions about the information that was included?
Thank you, Steve. So did we want to...
The next item, the consideration of the MOU with the village, we'll take that after we go back into closed session. We'll take that at the end of the meeting tonight. So that'll get moved
to consent.
Yeah, that'll come after. Yeah, we'll do consent next.
Right. So consent agendas, we can take it all and pull anything out.
I just have, why does the Muskie Expo need food?
They do casting.
They throw muskie.
They do what?
They cast, like.
With hookless?
Yeah.
Because if there aren't any hooks falling off those things that are
Correct,
full.
correct.
Okay,
But they
that's
do.
what I figured they would, but.
Yep, that's what it is.
So I would take a motion to accept it all.
Motion to accept all in the consent agenda.
Second.
Anything you want to question before we vote? All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Thank you. Board business, we have listening sessions coming up. The schedule was in there. Rebecca, how would you like us to sign up?
I forgot I had this in there, so I didn't put it in your folders.
I have one copied that I made. If somebody could copy, we could maybe still pass it around.
Yeah.
Because we have a little time. Maybe somebody could run and make some copies.
No. And he's got it, and you'll grab it. Thanks. Okay.
Do you want to do meetings after we go back into closed? Or no, because we need administrators first.
Yeah, I don't need any meetings at this, is anybody, do you need a meeting?
We've already picked a date.
You've already got yours already set? Okay, Tim, did you need a date? No, then I think we're good. We've got enough things going in the next.
How about approving the tax levy?
Oh,
Yes.
thank you.
And it is for October 25th, and we need a time to set that levy meeting.
This is a relatively short meeting. It's the week after the annual meeting. It's solely to set the levy and
6 o'clock?
6 o'clock.
What time, or what date?
25th.
The 25th.
So moved.
Monday after. So Dave made a motion. I need a second.
Second.
At 6?
Second.
That's why I won't be able to make it.
Is there a better time?
Said the 25th.
The
25th.
25th.
I'm sorry, 25th.
Yeah.
I've got something at 5:15. Set it, and I'll see if I can arrange it.
Okay. So we have a motion for that meeting at 6 o'clock on the 25th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. So on the sign-up sheets, Rebecca, should you just sign up for anything you're available for and then you'll figure it out?
Yes, please sign up for as many as you are available for, and I will shuffle it around. I'll make sure that you're not in more than maybe 3 at the max.
Okay.
But if you give me as many dates as you're available for, then that helps me move it around a little bit.
Thank you. So at this time, we're going to return to closed session.
Motion to go to closed session?
We need to,
Second.
Dave and Brian.
and